On Christmas Eve, a millionaire disguised as Santa Claus hands out presents in a luxurious hall. Suddenly, a little beggar girl appears and shouts, "I want my daddy back!" What the millionaire did next brought everyone to tears. The opulent grand ballroom of the Evergreen Hotel buzzed with excitement on Christmas Eve. Glittering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the festive decorations, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and clinking champagne glasses. At the center of it all stood Maxwell Thornton, his imposing figure somewhat softened by the red velvet Santa Claus suit he wore. Maxwell shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the fake beard that itched his chin. He was a man more accustomed to impeccably tailored suits than this jolly costume. At 55, he cut an impressive figure, tall, with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. Those eyes, however, held a sadness that even the most expensive designer frames couldn't hide. "Mr. Thornton, smile, please." A photographer's voice rang out, and Maxwell plastered on his practiced grin. Flash. Another picture for the society pages. Another piece of evidence that Maxwell Thornton, billionaire CEO of Thornton Industries, had a heart beneath his icy exterior. As he posed, Maxwell's mind wandered to the real reason he was enduring this spectacle. It had been his PR team's idea, of course. "It'll soften your image," they'd insisted. "Show the public you're more than just a ruthless businessman." If only they knew the truth. Maxwell Thornton wasn't just a cold-hearted tycoon. He was a broken man, going through the motions of life but never truly living. 7 years ago, on a night much like this one, his world had shattered. His daughter, Emily, his only child and the light of his life, had stormed out of the house after a heated argument. She never made it home. The memory of that night still haunted him. The screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal, the frantic phone call that turned his world upside down. In an instant, his brilliant, vivacious 22-year-old daughter was gone, leaving behind a void that no amount of money or success could fill. "Ho, ho, ho," Maxwell forced out the jolly laugh as a young boy climbed onto his lap. "And what would you like for Christmas, young man?" The child rattled off a list of toys, his eyes shining with hope and excitement. Maxwell nodded along, all the while thinking how Emily used to light up the same way when she was little. He'd give anything to go back to those simpler times, to hold her in his arms just one more time. As the evening wore on, Maxwell went through the motions. He distributed elaborately wrapped gifts to the children of New York's elite, each one hand-selected by his efficient but impersonal assistant. He posed for countless photos, shook hands with important donors, and tried to ignore the pitying looks from those who knew his story. "You're doing great, Mr. Thornton," whispered Sarah, his head of PR, as she passed by. "The press is eating this up. Your approval ratings are going to soar." Maxwell nodded curtly, suppressing the urge to tell her exactly what he thought of approval ratings. What did it matter if the public loved him, when the one person whose love he truly craved was gone forever? As the crowd began to thin, Maxwell found himself alone near the grand Christmas tree that dominated one corner of the ballroom. Its twinkling lights reflected in the ornate ornaments, creating a kaleidoscope of color. At the very top sat a star, its golden rays reaching out like hopeful fingers into the darkness. For a moment, Maxwell allowed himself to remember. He thought of Emily's first Christmas, how her tiny hands had reached for the shiny ornaments. He remembered teaching her to ice skate, her peals of laughter echoing across the frozen pond behind their country estate. He recalled her graduation day, how proud he'd been as she'd accepted her diploma, the future stretching bright and limitless before her. And then, unbidden, came the memory of their last conversation, the shouting, the slammed doors, the words he wished he could take back. If he'd known it would be the last time he'd ever see her. Maxwell squeezed his eyes shut, willing the memories away. This was why he avoided Christmas, why he buried himself in work and avoided anything that might stir up the past. It was easier to be the cold, distant Maxwell Thornton that everyone expected than to confront the grief that threatened to consume him. A commotion near the entrance pulled Maxwell from his reverie. He turned, expecting to see a late-arriving guest or perhaps an overzealous fan trying to crash the party. What he saw instead made his heart skip a beat. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, stood in the doorway. Her clothes were tattered and dirty, her hair a tangled mess. Tears streaked her grimy cheeks, leaving trails through the dirt. She looked utterly lost and completely out of place in the glittering ballroom. For a moment, no one moved. The remaining guests stared in shock, cocktails frozen halfway to their lips. Security guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to remove the child or wait for instructions. The girl's eyes darted around the room, wide with a mix of fear and determination. And then, as if drawn by some unseen force, her gaze locked onto Maxwell. In his red suit and white beard, he must have looked like a beacon of hope to the child. With small, hesitant steps, she began to make her way across the ballroom. The crowd parted before her, murmurs of surprise and concern rippling through the air. Maxwell found himself rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the approaching child. As she drew closer, he could see the hope shining in her eyes, mixed with a desperation that made his chest tighten. Who was this child? Where had she come from? And why did he feel such an inexplicable connection to her? The girl stopped a few feet away from Maxwell, her small frame trembling slightly. She looked up at him, her lips quivering as she fought back tears. And then, in a voice that was both fragile and filled with a strength beyond her years, she spoke the words that would change Maxwell Thornton's life forever. "I want my daddy back." The ballroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on the unlikely pair, the billionaire in a Santa suit and the ragged little girl who had appeared out of nowhere. As Maxwell stared into her pleading eyes, he felt something stir within him, something he thought had died along with Emily 7 years ago. In that moment, Maxwell Thornton had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to be turned upside down. He couldn't have known that this child's simple request would set in motion a chain of events that would force him to confront his past, challenge everything he thought he knew, and perhaps, just perhaps, offer him a chance at redemption. All he knew was that, for the first time in 7 years, he felt something other than numbness. And as he looked down at the little girl, he made a silent vow, one that would lead him down a path he never could have imagined. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Maxwell Thornton stood frozen, the child's words echoing in his mind. "I want my daddy back." Such a simple request, yet loaded with a weight that threatened to crush him. For a moment, Maxwell was transported back in time. He saw Emily at this girl's age, her eyes sparkling with the same mix of hope and determination. The resemblance was uncanny, and it shook him to his core. Slowly, as if moving through molasses, Maxwell knelt down to the girl's level. Up close, he could see the hollowness in her cheeks, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of nights spent in fear and hunger. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was a fierce intelligence in her gaze that both unnerved and intrigued him. "What's your name, little one?" Maxwell asked, his voice gentler than it had been in years. The girl hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. Finally, she whispered, "Lily, my name is Lily." "Lily," Maxwell repeated, tasting the name. "That's a beautiful name. Can you tell me why you're here, Lily? Where's your mother?" Lily's lower lip trembled, but she squared her small shoulders. "I don't have a mama. She went to heaven when I was a baby. It's just been me and Daddy, but he's gone too." Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. He was acutely aware of the crowd watching them, of Sarah hovering nearby, probably already planning how to spin this unexpected interruption. But for once, he didn't care about appearances or public perception. All he could focus on was the lost little girl in front of him. "Gone?" he prompted gently. "What do you mean, Lily?" Lily's eyes welled up with fresh tears. "He disappeared 3 years ago. The police said he stole money, but I know my daddy would never do that. He was good and kind and—" She broke off, her small frame shaking with sobs. Without thinking, Maxwell pulled her into a hug. He felt her stiffen for a moment before melting into his embrace, her tears soaking into the fake fur of his Santa suit. As he held her, he was struck by how small and fragile she felt, how desperately she clung to him as if he were a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Shh, it's okay," he murmured, patting her back awkwardly. It had been so long since he'd comforted anyone, the gestures felt foreign to him. "Can you tell me more about what happened?" Lily pulled back, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Daddy worked for a big company. He was always talking about how excited he was, how he was going to make things better for us. But then one day, the police came to our house. They said Daddy had stolen lots of money. He told me to hide, said he'd come back for me, but—" Her voice broke. "He never did." Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. A nagging suspicion began to form in the back of his mind, but he pushed it aside for now. "And what happened to you after that, Lily?" The little girl's eyes hardened, a look no child should ever have to wear. "I ran away before they could take me. I've been living on the streets trying to find my daddy, and then I saw you on TV dressed like Santa, giving away presents at this party. I thought if anyone could help me, it would be Santa." The raw hope in her voice made Maxwell's heart constrict. He was suddenly acutely aware of the absurdity of the situation. Him, Maxwell Thornton, feared businessman and notorious recluse, dressed as Santa Claus and being asked to perform a Christmas miracle. He should call child services. He should hand this over to the authorities, let them handle it. It was the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. But as he looked into Lily's eyes, he found he couldn't bring himself to crush her hope. "Lily," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not really Santa Claus, I'm just a man in a costume, but—" He took a deep breath, hardly believing what he was about to say. "But I promise you I'll do everything in my power to help you find your father." The words were out before he could stop them. Around him he heard gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Sarah was probably having a conniption, but none of that mattered when he saw the way Lily's face lit up, hope blooming like a flower in the desert. "Really?" she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "You'll help me?" Maxwell nodded, feeling a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. What was he getting himself into? "Really? But Lily, I need you to trust me. We need to get you somewhere safe, get you cleaned up and fed. Will you let me help you?" Lily hesitated, years of street-learned caution warring with her desperate need for help. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise. Promise you won't give up until we find my daddy." Maxwell felt the weight of her trust settle on his shoulders. It had been so long since anyone had looked at him with such faith, such hope. He knew he should be cautious, should qualify his promise. But looking into Lily's eyes, he found he couldn't. "I promise," he said solemnly. "We'll find your father, Lily, no matter what it takes." As soon as the words left his mouth, the spell that had fallen over the ballroom seemed to break. Suddenly, everyone was moving at once. Sarah appeared at his elbow, her face a mask of professional concern, hiding what he was sure was panic. "Mr. Thornton," she hissed, "what are you doing? We need to call the authorities, get this child into proper care." "You can't possibly—" Maxwell cut her off with a look. "Sarah, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few days and get me everything you can find on missing persons cases involving financial crimes from the last 3 years. Sarah's jaw dropped. "But sir, the merger talks, the board meeting—" "Can wait," Maxwell finished firmly. He turned back to Lily, who was watching the exchange with wary eyes. "It's okay," he assured her. "You're safe now. We're going to figure this out together." As he led Lily out of the ballroom, ignoring the flashing cameras and the buzz of speculation that followed them, Maxwell felt something he hadn't experienced in years: purpose. For so long he'd been going through the motions, building his empire while feeling hollow inside. But now, looking down at the little girl who clutched his hand so trustingly, he felt alive again. He had no idea what he was getting himself into. He didn't know the can of worms he was about to open, or the dangers that lay ahead. All he knew was that for the first time since Emily's passing, he had made a promise he intended to keep, no matter the cost. As they stepped out into the cold New York night, snowflakes swirling around them, Maxwell Thornton realized that his life would never be the same again. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls and challenges. But as he helped Lily into his waiting car, he felt a glimmer of something he'd thought was lost forever: hope. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the glittering party and the life Maxwell had known. As they drove into the night, towards an uncertain future, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a promise to a lost little girl. It was a chance at redemption, an opportunity to right old wrongs and perhaps, just perhaps, find healing for his own wounded heart. Little did he know that this Christmas Eve encounter was just the beginning of a story that would unravel decades-old secrets, challenge everything he thought he knew, and ultimately lead him to a truth more surprising and life-changing than he could ever have imagined. The first rays of sunlight crept through the windows of Maxwell Thornton's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the sleeping form of Lily. She was curled up on the plush sofa, wrapped in a soft blanket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Maxwell stood in the doorway watching her sleep, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Last night felt like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. After leaving the charity event, he had brought Lily directly to his home, unsure of what else to do. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had taken one look at the disheveled child and sprung into action, drawing a warm bath and preparing a late-night meal that Lily had devoured as if she hadn't eaten in days. Which, Maxwell realized with a pang, might very well have been the case. Now, in the cold light of day, the reality of what he had done, what he had promised, began to sink in. He, Maxwell Thornton, notorious for his aloofness and cold business acumen, had vowed to help a street urchin find her missing father. It was madness, it was reckless, it was the first thing that had made him feel truly alive in 7 years. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his reverie. Mrs. Chen entered. Her usually stoic face softened with concern. "Mr. Thornton," she whispered, careful not to wake Lily. "Ms. Reeves is here. She says it's urgent." Maxwell sighed. Sarah Reeves, his PR manager, had been calling non-stop since last night. He had ignored her calls, but he knew he couldn't avoid her forever. "Tell her I'll be down in a minute," he said quietly. With one last glance at Lily's sleeping form, Maxwell made his way to his home office. Sarah was pacing the room, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, a clear sign of her distress. "Mr. Thornton," she began as soon as he entered, "we need to talk about last night. The media is having a field day. Billionaire Santa adopts street urchin. That's just one of the headlines. We need to get ahead of this story before it spirals out of control." Maxwell held up a hand, silencing her. "Sarah, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't about PR. This is about doing the right thing." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "The right thing? Mr. Thornton, with all due respect, you can't just take in a child off the street. There are laws, procedures. We don't know anything about this girl or her story. For all we know, this could be some elaborate scam." A flash of anger surged through Maxwell. "Her name is Lily," he said, his voice low and intense. "And if you had seen her eyes last night, you'd know this is no scam. This child has been through hell, Sarah, and I made her a promise." "A promise you can't possibly keep," Sarah exclaimed, exasperated. "Mr. Thornton, you're not a detective. You're not child services. You're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You have responsibilities, obligations. The board is already asking questions. And let's not forget the merger talks with Global Tech. They're expecting you in London next week." Maxwell turned to look out the window, his jaw clenched. Sarah was right, of course. He had obligations, a company to run, deals to make. But every time he thought about backing out, he saw Lily's hopeful face, heard her trembling voice asking for her daddy back. "Cancel the London trip," he said finally, turning back to face Sarah, "and call a board meeting for this afternoon. I'll address their concerns personally." Sarah looked like she was about to argue further, but something in Maxwell's expression stopped her. Instead, she asked, "And what should I tell the press?" Maxwell thought for a moment. "Tell them. Tell them that Maxwell Thornton is taking some personal time to focus on a private matter. No further comments at this time." Sarah nodded, clearly unhappy, but recognizing a losing battle when she saw one. As she turned to leave, Maxwell added, "And Sarah? I need you to get me everything you can on financial crimes involving missing persons over the last 3 years. Focus on cases where the accused disappeared before trial." Sarah's eyebrows shot up, but she nodded again. "I'll have it on your desk by this afternoon," she said, then left the room, already typing furiously on her phone. Alone again, Maxwell sank into his chair, the weight of what lay ahead settling on his shoulders. He had no idea how to even begin searching for Lily's father, or what he would do if, when, he found him. All he knew was that he had to try. A small noise from the doorway made him look up. Lily stood there, her hair tousled from sleep, wearing one of his old t-shirts that Mrs. Chen had found for her to sleep in. It hung down to her knees like a dress. "Good morning," Maxwell said softly, trying to smile reassuringly. "Did you sleep well?" Lily nodded, her eyes darting around the opulent office. "Your house is really big," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Maxwell chuckled, the sound rusty from disuse. "Yes, I suppose it is." Lily's face grew serious. "Are you really going to help me find my daddy?" she asked, a hint of fear in her voice, as if she was afraid he might have changed his mind in the light of day. Maxwell stood and walked over to her, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "I made you a promise, Lily," he said solemnly, "and I intend to keep it. We're going to find your father no matter what it takes." Lily's face lit up with a smile so bright it almost hurt to look at. Without warning, she threw her arms around Maxwell's neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Maxwell froze for a moment, unused to such displays of affection. Then, slowly, he wrapped his arms around her small frame, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. As he held Lily, Maxwell made another silent vow. He would not only find her father, but he would also protect this child from any further harm. He didn't know how, but he would make sure she never had to live on the streets again, never had to go hungry or feel afraid. Little did Maxwell know that this vow would lead him down a path far more treacherous than he could have imagined. As he comforted Lily, forces were already being set in motion, forces that would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried, even if it meant silencing a billionaire and an orphaned little girl. But for now, in the warm morning light of his penthouse, Maxwell Thornton felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time: purpose. And with Lily's small hand in his, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter the cost. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maxwell Thornton's office as he pored over the files Sarah had delivered. Stacks of papers covered his usually immaculate desk, each one detailing a different case of financial crime and disappearance. The sheer volume was overwhelming, but Maxwell was determined to find a lead, any lead, that might help him keep his promise to Lily. Lily herself was in the next room, happily occupied with new coloring books and toys that Mrs. Chen had procured. The sound of her humming drifted through the partially open door, a reminder of why he was putting himself through this ordeal. As Maxwell flipped through another file, a name caught his eye: James Harper. He froze, a chill running down his spine. It couldn't be. Could it? With trembling hands, he pulled the file closer, scanning the details. James Harper, 32 years old at the time of his disappearance, accused of embezzling funds from... Maxwell's breath caught in his throat. From Thornton Industries, the very company he had built from the ground up. Memories flooded back, memories he had suppressed for years. James Harper, a bright, ambitious young man who had worked in the finance department. Maxwell remembered being impressed by his innovative ideas, his dedication. And then the scandal. Millions of dollars missing, all traced back to James. The evidence had seemed irrefutable at the time. But now, looking at the file with fresh eyes, Maxwell began to see inconsistencies. The investigation had been rushed, the case closed almost too neatly, and James had vanished before he could stand trial, leaving behind... "Oh God," Maxwell whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. James Harper had left behind a 5-year-old daughter, a daughter who would now be 8. A daughter named Lily. The door creaked open wider, and Lily poked her head in. "Mr. Maxwell," she said hesitantly. "Are you okay? You look sad." Maxwell quickly composed himself, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Lily. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff." "How are you enjoying your new toys?" Lily's face lit up. "They're amazing. I've never had so many colors to draw with before." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Have you found anything about my daddy yet?" Maxwell's heart clenched. How could he tell her that her father might have been a criminal, that he might have been responsible for his disappearance? "Not yet, sweetheart," he said gently, "but I'm working on it. These things take time." Lily nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Okay, can I stay here with you for a while? I promise I'll be quiet." "Of course," Maxwell said, clearing a space on the couch for her. As Lily settled in with her coloring book, Maxwell turned back to the files, his mind racing. If James Harper was indeed Lily's father, and if he had been framed as Maxwell was beginning to suspect, then this went far beyond a simple missing persons case. This could implicate people within his own company, people he had trusted for years. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sarah entered, her face grim. "Mr. Thornton, the board is ready for you." Maxwell nodded, standing up. He turned to Lily. "I have to go to a meeting now. Mrs. Chen will look after you. I'll be back soon, okay?" Lily nodded, her eyes never leaving her coloring book. As Maxwell followed Sarah out, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a lion's den. The boardroom was tense when Maxwell entered. He could feel the disapproval radiating from the stern faces around the table. Thomas Blackwood, the head of the board, spoke first. Maxwell, I think I speak for all of us when I say we're concerned about your recent activities. Taking in a street child, cancelling crucial meetings. This isn't like you. Maxwell took a deep breath. I understand your concerns, but I assure you everything is under control. I'm simply taking some personal time to address an important matter. A matter that could damage the reputation of this company, interjected Victoria Steele, another board member. The press is having a field day with this, Maxwell. We've worked hard to build Thornton Industries' image. We can't afford a scandal. Maxwell felt a flash of anger. A scandal. Helping a child in need is now considered a scandal. It is when that child's story is linked to a 3-year-old embezzlement case involving our company, Thomas said quietly. The room fell silent. Maxwell stared at Thomas, his mind reeling. How do you know about that? He demanded. Thomas slid a file across the table. We have our sources, Maxwell. James Harper, ring any bells? The man you're looking for is a fugitive. If you pursue this, you're not just risking your reputation, but the entire company's. Maxwell's hands clenched into fists under the table. Are you threatening me, Thomas? Thomas leaned back, his expression unreadable. Consider it a friendly warning. Let this go, Maxwell. Hand the child over to the proper authorities. Focus on what you do best, running this company. For a moment, Maxwell was tempted. It would be so easy to walk away, to return to the comfortable numbness of his old life. But then he thought of Lily's hopeful face, of the promise he had made. No, he said, his voice firm. I made a promise and I intend to keep it. If that's a problem for this board, then perhaps it's time for new leadership. A murmur ran through the room. Maxwell stood, straightening his jacket. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a child waiting for me, and a mystery to solve. As he walked out of the boardroom, leaving stunned silence in his wake, Maxwell felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. He had just challenged the board of his own company, potentially risking everything he had built over the years. But for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. Back in his office, he found Lily asleep on the couch, her coloring book clutched to her chest. Looking at her peaceful face, Maxwell knew he had made the right choice. Whatever secrets lay buried in the past, whatever dangers lurked ahead, he would face them. For Lily, for James, and for the man he used to be, before grief and ambition had turned him cold. As the sun set over the New York skyline, casting a golden glow over the sleeping child, Maxwell Thornton settled back at his desk. There was work to be done, a mystery to unravel, and a father to find. And he wouldn't rest until he had uncovered the truth, no matter where it led him. Little did he know that his determination had not gone unnoticed. In the shadows, forces were gathering, ready to protect their secrets at any cost. The game was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than Maxwell could have ever imagined. The next morning dawned grey and overcast, matching Maxwell Thornton's mood as he nursed his third cup of coffee. He had spent most of the night poring over the files on James Harper's case, searching for any clue that might have been overlooked. The more he dug, the more convinced he became that something wasn't right about the whole affair. Lily padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She was wearing new clothes that Mrs. Chen had bought for her, a simple pair of jeans and a bright yellow sweater that made her look like any other middle-class child. The transformation was remarkable, and it struck Maxwell how easily appearances could be deceiving. "Good morning, Mr. Maxwell," Lily said, climbing onto a stool at the kitchen island. "Did you find anything about my daddy?" Maxwell hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm working on it, Lily. These things take time, but I promise you, I'm not giving up." Mrs. Chen bustled in, clucking her tongue at the sight of Maxwell's rumpled appearance. "Mr. Thornton, you need rest and a proper breakfast. Sit, both of you. I'll make pancakes." As they ate, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the domesticity of the scene. For years he had eaten alone, if he remembered to eat at all. Now, watching Lily demolish a stack of pancakes, he felt a warmth he had almost forgotten existed. His phone buzzed, shattering the peaceful moment. It was a text from Sarah. "Turn on the news." Now, with a sense of dread, Maxwell reached for the remote. The TV flickered to life, revealing a news anchor with a serious expression. In a shocking turn of events, billionaire CEO Maxwell Thornton has been accused of harboring a fugitive's child. Sources close to Thornton Industries claim that the girl Thornton was seen with at a recent charity event is none other than the daughter of James Harper, a former employee wanted for embezzlement. The whereabouts of Harper remain unknown, but questions are being raised about Thornton's involvement in the case. Thornton Industries stock has already taken a hit in pre-market trading. Maxwell muted the TV, his mind racing. How had they found out about Lily's connection to James so quickly? And who had leaked the information? "Mr. Maxwell?" Lily's voice was small and frightened. "Are they talking about my daddy? Is he really a bad man?" Maxwell turned to her, his heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. "Lily, listen to me. We don't know the whole story yet, but I promise you we're going to find out the truth. No matter what anyone says, I'm not giving up on you or your father." Lily nodded, but Maxwell could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. He needed to act fast to find some concrete evidence that could clear James's name and keep Lily safe. "Mrs. Chen, can you watch Lily for a while? I need to make some calls." In his office, Maxwell first dialed Sarah. "I need you to find out who leaked that information to the press," he said without preamble, "and I want increased security for Lily. No one gets near her without my express permission." Next, he called an old friend, Detective Michael Rodriguez. They had drifted apart over the years, but if there was anyone Maxwell could trust to dig into this case discreetly, it was Mike. "Max, is that really you?" Mike's gruff voice held a note of surprise. "I thought you'd forgotten my number." "I need your help, Mike," Maxwell said, cutting to the chase. He quickly outlined the situation with Lily and his suspicions about James Harper's case. There was a long pause on the other end. "You're walking into a minefield, Max," Mike finally said. "This isn't just about one man's disappearance. If what you're suggesting is true, we could be looking at a conspiracy involving some very powerful people." "I know the risks," Maxwell replied, "but I made a promise to a little girl, Mike. I can't back out now." Mike sighed. "All right. I'll see what I can dig up, but Max, watch your back. Whoever framed Harper might not stop at ruining reputations if they feel threatened." As he hung up, Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, what had he dragged Lily into? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Mrs. Chen, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mr. Thornton, there's someone here to see you. She says she has information about James Harper." Maxwell's heart raced. "Who is it?" "She won't give her name, sir, but she seems desperate." Intrigued and wary, Maxwell nodded. "Send her in. And Mrs. Chen, make sure Lily stays in her room." Moments later, a woman entered his office. She was in her mid-30s with dark circles under her eyes and a haunted look that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. She clutched a worn envelope to her chest like a lifeline. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Rachel Harper. I'm James's sister." Maxwell's eyes widened. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "You have information about your brother?" Rachel nodded, glancing nervously at the door. "I shouldn't be here. If they find out, but I saw the news. I know you have Lily. I couldn't stay silent anymore." "Who are they, Rachel? Who are you afraid of?" Rachel's hands shook as she placed the envelope on Maxwell's desk. "James isn't a criminal, Mr. Thornton. He was set up. He found something big. That's why they made him disappear." Maxwell leaned forward, his heart pounding. What did he find, Rachel? What was so important that they would frame an innocent man? Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but before she could utter a word, a deafening crash echoed through the penthouse. The sound of breaking glass was followed by Lily's terrified scream. Maxwell leapt to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stay here," he shouted to Rachel as he raced out of the office. He burst into Lily's room to find the window shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floor. Mrs. Chen was huddled in a corner, a gash on her forehead bleeding freely, and Lily was gone. On the windowsill, weighted down by a piece of broken glass, was a note. With trembling hands, Maxwell picked it up and read the chilling message: "Back off, Thornton, or the girl disappears just like her father." As the reality of the situation sank in, Maxwell felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced before. They had taken Lily. They had dared to threaten a child to keep their secret safe. In that moment, Maxwell Thornton made a silent vow. He would find Lily. He would uncover the truth about James Harper, and he would make those responsible pay, no matter the cost. Little did he know that this vow would lead him down a path of danger and discovery that would shake the very foundations of his world. The game had changed, and the stakes were now life and death. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Maxwell paced his living room like a caged tiger, barking orders into his phone, while Detective Rodriguez coordinated with the NYPD. Rachel Harper sat on the couch, her face ashen, clutching the mysterious envelope to her chest. "I want every camera in the city checked," Maxwell growled into his phone. "Traffic cams, ATMs, store security systems, everything. I don't care what it costs. Find her." As he hung up, Mike approached him, his expression grim. "Max, we've got a problem. The kidnapping was too clean, too professional. This isn't some random crime. Whoever took Lily knew exactly what they were doing." Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear warring inside him. "We can't just sit here and do nothing, Mike. Every minute that passes—" "I know," Mike cut him off, "but rushing in blindly won't help Lily. We need to be smart about this." He glanced at Rachel. "Maybe it's time we heard what Mrs. Harper knows." Maxwell nodded, turning to Rachel. "Please, Rachel, whatever you know, whatever James found, we need to hear it now. Lily's life could depend on it." Rachel took a shaky breath, finally opening the envelope she had been guarding so closely. "James sent me this about a week before he disappeared. He said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe until I found someone I could trust." She pulled out a USB drive and a handwritten letter. Maxwell snatched up the letter, his eyes scanning the page frantically. As he read, his face paled. "My God," he whispered. Mike leaned in. "What is it, Max? What did Harper find?" Maxwell looked up, his eyes haunted. According to this, James uncovered evidence of a massive money laundering operation, not just within Thornton Industries, but involving several other major corporations and high-ranking government officials. Rachel nodded, tears in her eyes. "James said it went all the way to the top. That's why he ran. He knew they'd never let him live if he came forward." Mike whistled low. "No wonder they want to keep this quiet. If this gets out, it could bring down some of the most powerful people in the country." Maxwell's mind was reeling. How could this have been happening right under his nose? He had prided himself on running a clean, ethical company. Had he been that blind? Or worse, had he been deliberately kept in the dark? A thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. "Their board meeting," he said, his voice tight with anger. "They knew. They've known all along. That's why they were so desperate to shut me down." Mike nodded grimly. "It makes sense. If you started digging into Harper's case, you might have uncovered the whole operation." Maxwell's hands clenched into fists. "And now they've taken Lily to keep me in line. To hell with that. Mike, I want everything on that USB drive analyzed. Names, dates, transactions, everything. We're going to blow this wide open." "Max, think about what you're saying," Mike cautioned. "These people have already shown they're willing to kidnap a child. If we move too fast, we could be putting Lily in even more danger." Maxwell closed his eyes, forcing himself to take a deep breath. Mike was right, of course. They couldn't afford to be reckless, not with Lily's life on the line. "Okay," he said finally, "we do this smart, but we do it fast. Every minute we wait is another minute Lily's in their hands." As they huddled around Mike's laptop, poring over the files James had uncovered, Maxwell couldn't shake the image of Lily's frightened face from his mind. He had promised to protect her, to find her father. Instead, he had led her right into the lion's den. Hours passed as they dug deeper into the web of corruption James had uncovered. The scale of it was staggering. Billions of dollars funneled through shell companies, bribes paid to key officials, evidence tampered with to protect the guilty. As dawn broke over the city, Maxwell stood at the window watching the sky lighten. He felt older than his years, the weight of everything he had learned pressing down on him. A hand on his shoulder made him turn. It was Rachel, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "We'll find her, Mr. Thornton. We'll find Lily and James. We have to believe that." Maxwell nodded, grateful for her strength. "Yes, we will. And when we do, we're going to make sure every last person involved in this pays for what they've done." Just then, Mike's voice cut through the quiet. "Guys, I think I've got something. A pattern in the transactions. They all seem to funnel through a series of companies owned by one man, Victor Crane." Maxwell's blood ran cold. Victor Crane. one of the most influential businessmen in New York, known for his philanthropy and political connections. He was also a member of Thornton Industries' board of directors. "I know where Crane lives," Maxwell said, a plan already forming in his mind. "A penthouse on the Upper East Side. If anyone knows where Lily is, it's him." Mike shook his head. "Max, we can't just storm in there. We need solid evidence, warrants. If we mess this up, they could walk away scot-free and we might never find Lily." But Maxwell was beyond caution now. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to act, to do something, anything, to find Lily. "I'm not asking you to come, Mike," he said, his voice hard with determination. "But I'm going. Crane has the answers we need, and I'm going to get them out of him, one way or another." Rachel stood up, her face set. "I'm coming with you. James is my brother, and Lily is my niece. I have as much right to answers as anyone." Mike looked between them, clearly torn. Finally, he sighed. "All right, but we do this my way. No vigilante justice, no matter how tempting it might be. We get in, we get information, and we get out. Agreed?" Maxwell nodded, already moving towards the door. As they left the penthouse, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. The man staring back at him was a far cry from the polished CEO the world knew. This man had a dangerous glint in his eye, a set to his jaw that spoke of unwavering determination. For better or worse, Maxwell Thornton had been irrevocably changed by the events of the past few days, and he knew, with a certainty that should have frightened him, that he would stop at nothing to bring Lily home safely and expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. As they stepped into the elevator, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart nearly stopped as he read the message. "Tick-tock, Mr. Thornton. How much is the little girl's life worth to you? You have 24 hours to make a choice, your company or the child. Choose wisely." The game had changed once again, and now Maxwell was racing against the clock to save not just Lily's life but his own soul. The sleek elevator ascended silently, carrying Maxwell, Rachel, and Mike towards Victor Crane's penthouse. Maxwell's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear and determination coursing through his veins. The weight of his phone in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing floor. The ultimatum it contained echoing in his mind: his company or Lily's life. As they reached the top floor, Mike placed a restraining hand on Maxwell's arm. "Remember," he said in a low voice, "we're here for information only. No matter what happens, we can't afford to tip our hand. If Crane suspects we know too much, Lily could pay the price." Maxwell nodded tersely, forcing himself to take a deep breath. He had to stay calm, stay focused, for Lily's sake. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a luxurious foyer. A stern-faced security guard stood at attention, his hand instinctively moving towards his concealed weapon as they stepped out. "Mr. Thornton," the guard said, surprise evident in his voice. "Mr. Crane wasn't expecting you." Maxwell put on his most charming smile, the one he reserved for difficult board meetings and press conferences. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. Victor and I have some urgent business to discuss." The guard hesitated, clearly torn between his duty and the prospect of turning away one of the most powerful men in New York. Finally, he nodded and stepped aside. "I'll inform Mr. Crane of your arrival." As they were led through the opulent penthouse, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the obscene display of wealth. Priceless artwork adorned the walls, and the furnishings looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a home. It was a stark reminder of the vast sums of money at stake in this conspiracy. They found Victor Crane in his study, a glass of scotch in hand despite the early hour. He was a tall, imposing man in his 60s, with steel-grey hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. As they entered, he set down his drink and rose to greet them, his face a mask of polite surprise. "Maxwell, what an unexpected pleasure," Crane said smoothly, though his eyes darted suspiciously to Rachel and Mike. "To what do I owe this early morning visit?" Maxwell stepped forward, his own mask firmly in place. "Victor, I apologize for the intrusion, but something urgent has come up, something that concerns both of us." Crane's eyebrow arched slightly. "Oh? And what might that be?" "It's about James Harper," Maxwell said, watching Crane's face carefully for any reaction. For a split second, Crane's composure slipped. A flicker of fear passed through his eyes, before his mask of calm indifference slid back into place. But it was enough. Maxwell knew he had struck a nerve. "Harper," Crane said, his voice carefully controlled. "That embezzler who disappeared a few years ago, what about him?" Maxwell took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Cut the act, Victor. We know about the money laundering. We know Harper discovered your operation and you framed him to keep him quiet. And we know you're behind Lily's kidnapping." Crane's face hardened, all pretense of civility vanishing. "You're playing a very dangerous game, Maxwell. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then enlighten me," Maxwell growled. "Where's the girl, Victor? Where's Lily?" Crane's laugh was cold and humorless. "You think I'd tell you, even if I knew? You're in over your head, Maxwell. This goes far beyond anything you can imagine. Walk away now while you still can." Rachel stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "That's my niece you're talking about, you bastard. If anything happens to her—" "You'll what?" Crane sneered. "Go to the police, the media. You have no proof, no leverage. And even if you did, do you really think the authorities would move against us? We own them." Mike moved to intervene, but Maxwell held up a hand to stop him. He could feel the situation spiraling out of control, but he couldn't back down. Not now. "You're right about one thing, Victor," Maxwell said, his voice dangerously calm. "I don't have proof yet, but I will find it, and when I do, I'll bring your whole operation crashing down around your ears." Crane's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat, Maxwell?" "No," Maxwell replied, meeting Crane's gaze unflinchingly. "It's a promise." For a long moment, the two men stared each other down, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, unexpectedly, Crane's face split into a wide, unsettling grin. "Oh, Maxwell," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You always were too noble for your own good. It's almost admirable in a quixotic sort of way. But let me give you some free advice. Go home. Forget about the girl, forget about Harper. Focus on your company and your shareholders. That's what you're good at." Maxwell felt his temper rising, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, his blood running cold as he read the new message. "Time's running out, Mr. Thornton. Make your choice. The paperwork to sign over control of Thornton Industries will be delivered to your office by noon. Sign it, and the girl goes free. Refuse and, well, let's just say you don't want to refuse." Maxwell looked up from his phone to find Crane watching him with a knowing smirk. "Tick-tock, Maxwell," he said softly. "What's it going to be? Your life's work or a little girl you barely know?" In that moment, Maxwell felt the full weight of the choice before him. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for his entire life, hung in the balance. And against it all was Lily, an innocent child caught in a web of corruption and greed. As he stood there, torn between two impossible choices, Maxwell realized that this was about more than just Lily or his company. It was about the kind of man he wanted to be, the kind of world he wanted to live in. And in that realization, he found his answer. "You're wrong, Victor," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "I do have leverage. I have the truth. And I'm going to make sure the whole world knows it, no matter what it costs me." With that, Maxwell turned on his heel and strode out of the study, Rachel and Mike hurrying after him. As they entered the elevator, Mike gave him a worried look. "What now, Max? We're running out of time." Maxwell's jaw was set with determination. "Now? Now we go public. We take everything we have to the media, to the FBI, to anyone who will listen. We blow this whole thing wide open." Rachel gasped. "But what about Lily? If we do that, they might—" "They won't," Maxwell cut her off. "Because we're going to find her first. And to do that, we need help, lots of it." As the elevator descended, Maxwell's mind raced. He had just declared war on some of the most powerful people in the country. The odds were stacked against him, the risks enormous. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The game had changed once again. And this time, Maxwell Thornton was playing for keeps. The New York streets were a blur as Maxwell's car sped through the early morning traffic. In the back seat, Rachel and Mike huddled over laptops, pouring through the data from James Harper's USB drive. Maxwell's mind was racing faster than the car, formulating and discarding plans as quickly as the city blocks flew by. "We need to move fast," Maxwell said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "They're expecting me to either cave or stall. We need to use that assumption against them." Mike looked up from his laptop, his face grim. "I've got contacts in the FBI who owe me favors. If we can get them this evidence, They might be able to move quickly enough to catch Crane and his associates off guard. Do it, Maxwell nodded. But we can't put all our eggs in one basket. Rachel, I need you to prepare a data package. Everything we have on the money laundering, the cover-up, all of it. We'll release it to every major news outlet simultaneously if we have to. Rachel's fingers flew over the keyboard. On it. But Maxwell, what about Thornton Industries? If we do this, the company's stock will tank. So could lose everything. Maxwell's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Some things are more important than money, Rachel. If taking down these bastards means losing my company, so be it. As they pulled up to Thornton Tower, Maxwell's phone buzzed again. Another message, this time with an image attached. His heart nearly stopped as he opened it. The picture showed Lily, tear-stained and terrified, holding up today's newspaper. Remember what's at stake, Mr. Thornton. Noon. Don't be late. Maxwell showed the others the message, his face a mask of barely contained fury. We're running out of time. Mike, get your FBI contacts moving. Rachel, finish that data package. I need to make a call. As Rachel and Mike hurried into the building, Maxwell stayed behind in the car. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. Then he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. This better be good, Thornton. Do you have any idea what time it is? I need your help, Jack, Maxwell said without preamble. It's about James Harper. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Jack spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. I thought we agreed never to speak of that again. Things have changed, Maxwell pressed on. Harper's daughter has been kidnapped. The same people who framed him are behind it. I need your resources, your connections. Help me find her, Jack. Another pause, this one even longer. You're playing with fire, Max. These people, they're not the kind you want as enemies. They made themselves my enemies the moment they took an innocent child, Maxwell growled. Are you in or not? A heavy sigh came through the phone. All right, Max, for old time's sake, but after this we're square. You understand? Understood, Maxwell said, relief flooding through him. I'll send you what we have. And Jack, thanks. As he hung up, Maxwell allowed himself a small smile. Jack Donovan might be a ruthless corporate raider, but he had resources and connections that could prove invaluable. More importantly, he owed Maxwell a debt, one that was about to be repaid. Back in his office, Maxwell found Rachel and Mike hard at work. Screens were filled with financial data, email chains, and surveillance photos. It was staggering to see the full scope of the conspiracy laid out before him. FBI's mobilizing, Mike reported. They're treating this as a top priority. But Max, even with everything we've given them, getting warrants and organizing raids is going to take time. Maxwell nodded grimly. Time we don't have. What about the news outlets? Rachel looked up from her computer. Data package is ready. One word from you and it goes out to every major network and newspaper in the country. Maxwell checked his watch. 10:30 a.m. 90 minutes until the deadline. 90 minutes to find Lily before he had to make an impossible choice. Hold off on sending it for now, he decided. We'll use it as a last resort. Right now, we need to focus on finding Lily. Just then, Maxwell's phone rang. It was Jack. Max, I've got something. One of my sources spotted a car matching the description from the kidnapping. It was seen entering a warehouse in Brooklyn about an hour ago. Maxwell's pulse quickened. Send me the address. And Jack? I owe you one. Just find the girl, Max, Jack replied gruffly before hanging up. Maxwell turned to the others, hope surging through him for the first time in hours. We've got a lead. Mike, call your FBI contacts. Tell them to meet us at these coordinates. Rachel, you stay here. If we're not back by noon, release everything to the press. Rachel stood up, her face set with determination. No way. That's my niece out there. I'm coming with you. Maxwell started to argue, but the look in Rachel's eyes stopped him. He recognized that determination. It was the same fire that had been driving him since this whole ordeal began. All right, he conceded. But you stay in the car, understand? This could get dangerous. As they raced towards Brooklyn, Maxwell felt the weight of the past few days pressing down on him. He had started this journey as a detached, isolated figure, concerned only with his company and his own grief. Now he found himself at the center of a web of conspiracy, fighting not just for Lily's life, but for justice, truth, and redemption. The warehouse loomed before them, a hulking mass of corrugated metal and broken windows. FBI vehicles were already on the scene, agents in tactical gear preparing to move in. Maxwell's heart pounded as he spotted a familiar car parked in the shadows, the same model from the kidnapping footage. As he stepped out of the car, Mike grabbed his arm. "Max, let the professionals handle this. You've done your part." But Maxwell shook him off. "I made a promise, Mike. I'm seeing this through." Before anyone could stop him, Maxwell was moving towards the warehouse, every sense on high alert. He could hear Rachel calling after him, the shouts of FBI agents telling him to stop. But none of that mattered. All he could think about was Lily, scared and alone, counting on him to save her. As he reached the warehouse door, Maxwell hesitated for just a moment. He knew that whatever lay on the other side would change his life forever. But there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open and stepped into the darkness beyond. The game was in its final stages, and the next few minutes would determine not just Lily's fate, but the future of everyone involved in this tangled web of deceit and corruption. Maxwell Thornton, once a man concerned only with profit margins and stock prices, was about to face his greatest challenge yet and discover what he was truly made of. The warehouse air was thick with dust and the musty scent of abandonment. Maxwell's eyes strained to adjust to the dim light filtering through grimy windows as he cautiously made his way deeper into the cavernous space. His heart pounded in his ears, every sense on high alert for any sign of Lily or her captors. Rows of abandoned machinery loomed like silent sentinels, casting long shadows in the weak sunlight. Maxwell's footsteps echoed ominously, despite his attempts to move quietly. He knew he was taking an enormous risk by entering alone, but the thought of Lily, scared and waiting for rescue, drove him forward. Suddenly, a muffled sound caught his attention. Maxwell froze, listening intently. There it was again, a soft whimper, barely audible but unmistakably human. It was coming from a small office at the far end of the warehouse. Maxwell's pulse quickened as he crept towards the sound, careful to stay in the shadows. As he neared the office, he could make out two voices, one gruff and impatient, the other trembling and young. "Please," the young voice pleaded. "I want to go home. I want my daddy." Lily. Maxwell's heart clenched at the fear in her voice. He was so close now, just a few more steps. "Shut up, kid," the gruff voice snapped. "Your daddy ain't coming, and if Thornton doesn't play ball, you might never see him again." Rage surged through Maxwell. Before he could think better of it, he burst through the office door. "Let her go!" he roared. The scene before him was seared into his memory in an instant. Lily, tear-stained and trembling, tied to a chair. A burly man with a scarred face, reaching for a gun at his waist. And in the corner, a figure Maxwell hadn't expected to see. Thomas Blackwood, head of Thornton Industries' board of directors. "Maxwell?" Thomas gasped, his face pale with shock. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing, Thomas," Maxwell growled, keeping his eyes on the armed man. "How deep does this corruption go?" The burly man had his gun out now, pointed squarely at Maxwell's chest. "One more step, Thornton, and I'll put a bullet in you." Maxwell raised his hands slowly, his mind racing. He could hear commotion outside. The FBI must be moving in. He just needed to buy a little more time. "Think about what you're doing," Maxwell said calmly, addressing both the gunman and Thomas. "This building is surrounded. There's no way out. But if you surrender now, give up Lily, maybe we can work something out." Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "Work something out? You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Maxwell. This goes beyond money laundering or corporate espionage. We're talking about power, real power, the kind that shapes nations. And kidnapping children is part of that power?" Maxwell spat, disgust evident in his voice. "Collateral damage," Thomas shrugged, though Maxwell could see a flicker of shame in his eyes. "We didn't want to involve the girl, but you left us no choice. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Maxwell's gaze flickered to Lily. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was also a glimmer of hope as she looked at him. "It's going to be okay, Lily," he said softly. "I promised I'd find you, and I keep my promises." The gunman growled, jabbing his weapon towards Maxwell. "Enough talk. On your knees, Thornton." "Now!" Maxwell tensed, preparing to move. But before he could, the warehouse erupted into chaos. The windows shattered as FBI agents in full tactical gear swarmed in. Flashbang grenades exploded, filling the air with deafening noise and blinding light. In the confusion, Maxwell lunged forward, tackling the gunman. They crashed to the floor, wrestling for control of the weapon. Maxwell could taste blood in his mouth as he fought with every ounce of strength he possessed. Suddenly, a shot rang out. For a terrifying moment, Maxwell wasn't sure who had been hit. Then the gunman went limp beneath him, a red stain spreading across his chest. Maxwell scrambled to his feet, his ears ringing from the gunshot and the flashbangs. Through the haze, he saw Thomas being wrestled to the ground by FBI agents, but none of that mattered. His eyes sought out only one person. "Lily!" he called out, frantically scanning the room, and then he saw her. In the chaos, she had managed to wiggle her chair over to a corner, as far from the violence as possible. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her whole body trembling. Maxwell rushed to her side, quickly untying her bonds. "Lily, it's okay, you're safe now, I've got you." As soon as she was free, Lily threw her arms around Maxwell's neck, sobbing into his shoulder. He held her tightly, his own eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this, but it's over now. You're safe." As the dust settled and the FBI secured the scene, Maxwell stood with Lily in his arms, unwilling to let her go. He saw Mike and Rachel burst in, their faces a mix of relief and concern. "Max!" Mike called out. "Thank God you're both okay." Rachel rushed forward, her arms outstretched. "Lily!" "Oh, my sweet girl!" Lily lifted her head from Maxwell's shoulder, her eyes widening in recognition. "Aunt Rachel?" As Maxwell gently passed Lily to her aunt, he felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him shaky and drained. But there was no time to rest. This was just the beginning. "Mike," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to move fast. Thomas Blackwood was here. This conspiracy goes deeper than we thought. We need to round up everyone involved before they can destroy evidence or flee." Mike nodded grimly. "We're on it, Max. But you need to get checked out by the medics. And Lily." Maxwell looked over at Lily, still clutching her aunt tightly. Despite everything she had been through, there was a strength in her eyes that amazed him. She was her father's daughter, no doubt about that. "Lily needs to be somewhere safe," Maxwell finished, "somewhere they can't get to her." As paramedics swarmed around them and FBI agents continued to secure the scene, Maxwell felt a strange mix of triumph and trepidation. They had won this battle, saved Lily from a terrible fate. But the war was far from over. The true test was yet to come. With Thomas Blackwood in custody and the conspiracy exposed, the full weight of their enemies would soon come crashing down upon them. Maxwell knew that the next few hours would be crucial. The pieces were in motion, the stakes higher than ever. As he watched Lily being gently led away by paramedics, Rachel at her side, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would see this through to the end, no matter the cost. For Lily, for James Harper, and for all those who had suffered at the hands of this corrupt cabal. The game had changed once again, and Maxwell Thornton was ready for whatever came next. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Maxwell found himself at the center of a whirlwind of FBI debriefings, medical checkups, and frantic phone calls. The adrenaline that had carried him through the warehouse rescue had long since faded, leaving him exhausted to his core. But there was no time to rest. Not with the dominoes of the conspiracy beginning to fall. In a secure room at FBI headquarters, Maxwell sat across from Agent Sarah Chen, the lead investigator on the case. Her sharp eyes missed nothing as she pored over his statement. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice crisp and professional, "I want to commend you for your actions today. You took an enormous risk, but thanks to you we've made significant headway in dismantling this operation." Maxwell nodded wearily. "What's the status on Thomas Blackwood and the others?" Agent Chen's lips thinned. "Blackwood is in custody, along with several other high-ranking executives from various corporations. Victor Crane, however, seems to have vanished. We have alerts out at all airports and border crossings, but—" She trailed off, her implication clear. Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. Crane was still out there, which meant none of them were truly safe yet. "And Lily?" he asked, trying to keep the worry from his voice. "Safe," Agent Chen assured him. "She and her aunt are in protective custody. We're arranging for them to be moved to a secure location until we can be certain the threat has passed." Relief washed over Maxwell, but it was short-lived. There was still one pressing question that had been nagging at him since the warehouse. "What about James Harper?" he asked. "Have you found any leads on his whereabouts?" Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. "We're following several promising leads, Mr. Thornton. But I have to be honest with you. After 3 years, the trail is cold. We'll do everything we can, but—" Maxwell understood the unspoken message. Finding James Harper alive was a long shot at best, but he refused to give up hope. He owed it to Lily to keep searching. As he left the FBI building, Maxwell was greeted by a wall of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. News of the raid and the high-profile arrests had broken, and the media frenzy was in full swing. "Mr. Thornton, is it true that members of your own board were involved in a massive money laundering scheme? How long have you known about this conspiracy, Mr. Thornton? Are the rumors true that you personally rescued a kidnapped child?" Maxwell pushed through the crowd, offering no comment. His mind was already racing ahead to the next steps. He needed to address his employees, reassure investors, and start the process of rooting out any remaining corruption within Thornton Industries. Back at Thornton Tower, he found the building in a state of controlled chaos. Employees huddled in groups, whispering frantically. Security guards stood at alert, eyeing everyone with suspicion. And in the lobby, a familiar face waited for him. "Jack," Maxwell said, surprised to see his old friend and occasional rival waiting for him. Jack Donovan stepped forward, his face uncharacteristically grave. "Hell of a day, Max. You okay?" Maxwell nodded, touched by the genuine concern in Jack's voice. "I've been better, but we got the girl out safely. That's what matters." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, Max, but this isn't over, not by a long shot. The vultures are already circling. Your stock is in freefall and there's talk of a shareholder revolt." Maxwell sighed heavily. He had expected as much, but hearing it confirmed still stung. "Let them come," he said wearily. "After what I've seen, what I've learned, the company seems almost trivial in comparison." Jack's eyebrows shot up. "That doesn't sound like the Maxwell Thornton I know. What happened to you in that warehouse?" Maxwell was quiet for a moment, reflecting on the events of the past few days. "I remembered what's really important," he said finally, "and I'm not going to forget again." Before Jack could respond, Maxwell's phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. "Lily's asking for you, can you come?" A warm feeling spread through Maxwell's chest. Despite everything she had been through, Lily still wanted to see him. He turned to Jack, an apologetic look on his face. "Go," Jack said, understanding immediately. "I'll hold down the fort here. We can strategize later." Maxwell nodded gratefully and headed for the exit. As he stepped out into the New York evening, he was struck by how different the city looked to him now. The towering skyscrapers and bustling streets that had once represented his realm now seemed almost foreign. At the safe house, Maxwell found Lily curled up on a couch, wrapped in a blanket, and clutching a stuffed animal that someone had given her. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Mr. Maxwell," she cried, jumping up to hug him. Maxwell knelt down, enveloping her in a gentle embrace. "Hey there, kiddo, how are you holding up?" Lily pulled back, her eyes serious. "I'm okay, a little scared still, but I knew you'd find me. You promised." Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. "That's right, I did, and I always keep my promises." Lily nodded solemnly. "Have you found my daddy yet?" The question hit Maxwell like a punch to the gut. "Not yet, Lily," he said softly. "But we're not giving up. I promise you we'll keep looking until we find him." Lily's lower lip trembled, but she put on a brave face. "Okay. Can I stay with you until we find him? You make me feel safe." Maxwell looked up at Rachel, who had been watching the exchange with tears in her eyes. She gave a small nod of approval. "Of course you can, Lily," Maxwell said, his voice thick with emotion. "For as long as you need." As he held Lily close, Maxwell felt a fierce protectiveness wash over him. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. There were still enemies out there, loose ends to tie up, a company to salvage. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He had started this journey as a man lost in his own grief and ambition. Now he had found something he never expected, a purpose beyond himself, a chance at redemption, and perhaps even a new family. The game wasn't over. Victor Crane was still at large, James Harper was still missing, and the full extent of the conspiracy was yet to be uncovered. But for the first time in years, Maxwell Thornton felt truly alive, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with Lily by his side. As the sun set over New York City, casting a golden glow through the safe house windows, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would see this through to the end, not just for himself but for Lily, for James, and for all those who had been victimized by greed and corruption. The real work was just beginning, and Maxwell Thornton was ready for the fight of his life. The early morning sun streamed through the windows of Maxwell Thornton's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table. It had been 2 weeks since the dramatic rescue at the warehouse, and a new routine was slowly taking shape. Lily sat across from Maxwell, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she devoured a stack of blueberry pancakes. Her nightmares had become less frequent, but Maxwell could still see the shadows of her ordeal in her eyes. Yet, there was also a resilience there that never ceased to amaze him. "Mr. Maxwell," Lily said between bites, "are we going to visit Aunt Rachel today?" Maxwell nodded, sipping his coffee. "That's right. And remember, you can just call me Maxwell. Or Max, if you prefer." Lily wrinkled her nose, considering. "I like Mr. Maxwell. It sounds more important." A chuckle escaped Maxwell's lips, a sound that was becoming more frequent these days. "All right, Mr. Maxwell it is then." As they finished breakfast, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a message from Mike. "New lead on Harper. Meet me at the office ASAP." Maxwell's heart raced. They had been chasing dead ends for weeks, but maybe this time. "Lily," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "there's been a change of plans. How would you like to come to the office with me today?" Lily's eyes lit up. She had visited Thornton Tower a few times since moving in with Maxwell, and she found the bustling energy of the place exciting. "Can I bring my coloring books?" "Of course," Maxwell smiled. "Mrs. Chen will help you pack a bag." As they rode the elevator up to the executive floor of Thornton Tower, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at how much his life had changed. The board of directors, facing public outrage and federal investigations, had rallied behind him. With Thomas Blackwood and several other corrupt members removed, Maxwell had been given a mandate to clean house and rebuild the company's reputation. It wasn't easy. The stock price was still recovering, and every day brought new challenges. But for the first time in years, Maxwell felt like he was doing something truly meaningful. The elevator doors opened, and Maxwell was immediately approached by his new assistant, Emily. "Mr. Thornton, Detective Rodriguez is waiting in your office," she said, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Lily. "And the PR team needs your approval on the press release for the new ethics initiative." Maxwell nodded, guiding Lily towards his office with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Tell PR I'll review it this afternoon. And Emily, could you show Lily to the conference room? Make sure she has everything she needs." Emily smiled warmly at Lily. "Of course, Mr. Thornton. Come on, Lily. I think we have some cool markers in the supply closet that you might like." As Lily followed Emily, chattering excitedly about her latest art project, Maxwell felt a pang in his chest. In just a few short weeks, this bright, resilient child had worked her way into his heart in a way he never thought possible. Shaking off the emotion, Maxwell entered his office to find Mike pacing nervously. "What have you got?" Maxwell asked without preamble. Mike ran a hand through his disheveled hair. A possible sighting of James Harper, a motel owner in upstate New York, recognized his photo, said a man matching his description had been staying there on and off for the past few months. Maxwell's pulse quickened. "How reliable is this lead?" "Reliable enough that I think we need to check it out ourselves," Mike said. "But Max, we need to be careful. If it really is Harper, he's been in hiding for 3 years. He might spook easily." Maxwell nodded, his mind racing. "All right, we'll leave first thing tomorrow morning. I'll need to make arrangements for Lily." As if summoned by her name, there was a soft knock at the door. Lily poked her head in, her face lighting up when she saw Mike. "Detective Mike," she exclaimed. "Are you here to help find my daddy?" Mike's face softened as he knelt down to Lily's level. "That's right, kiddo, mister. Maxwell and I are working very hard to find him." Lily's expression grew serious. "When you find him, can you tell him I'm sorry for not hiding better when the bad men came?" Maxwell felt his heart break a little. He crossed the room and knelt beside Lily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lily, listen to me. What happened wasn't your fault. Not at all. Your daddy loves you very much, and I'm sure the only thing he wants is to know that you're safe." Lily nodded, but Maxwell could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. He made a mental note to schedule another session with the child psychologist. The road to healing would be a long one, but he was determined to be there every step of the way. As Mike left to make preparations for their trip, Maxwell settled Lily in his office with her coloring books. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept wandering to the possibility of finding James Harper. What would he say to the man? How could he explain everything that had happened? The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By the time Maxwell and Lily headed home, the sun was setting over the New York skyline, painting the city in hues of gold and pink. In the car, Lily leaned against Maxwell's side, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Mr. Maxwell," she murmured. "Yes, Lily? If you find my daddy, will I have to leave?" Maxwell felt his breath catch in his throat. The question had been lurking in the back of his mind, but hearing it from Lily made it suddenly painfully real. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said honestly, "but no matter what happens, I promise I'll always be here for you. Always." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. As she drifted off to sleep, Maxwell gazed out at the city lights, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He knew that finding James Harper was the right thing to do, for Lily and for justice, but a small selfish part of him couldn't help but fear the changes it might bring. As the car pulled up to his building, Maxwell carefully lifted the sleeping Lily into his arms. Holding her close, he made a silent vow. Whatever tomorrow might bring, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on. For Lily, for James, and for the man he was becoming. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Maxwell Thornton felt ready to embrace it, come what may. The drive to upstate New York was tense with anticipation. Maxwell gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing with possibilities. Beside him, Mike pored over a map, double-checking the location of the motel where James Harper had allegedly been spotted. "You okay, Max?" Mike asked, glancing up from the map. "You've been quiet." Maxwell nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "Just thinking about what we'll say to him if we find him, about what this means for Lily." Mike's expression softened. "You've gotten pretty attached to her, haven't you?" "Is it that obvious?" Maxwell asked with a wry smile. "Only to anyone with eyes," Mike chuckled. Then, more seriously, "You've been good for her, Max. Whatever happens, don't forget that." As they pulled into the small town where the motel was located, Maxwell felt a mix of excitement and dread. They were so close to answers, to potentially reuniting Lily with her father. But would those answers bring healing or more pain? The Blue Pine Motel was a modest establishment on the outskirts of town. As they approached the office, Maxwell noticed a man watching them from behind a dusty window. The moment their eyes met, the man disappeared from view. "Did you see that?" Maxwell whispered to Mike. Mike nodded, his hand moving instinctively towards his concealed weapon. "Stay alert. This could get complicated." They entered the office to find a nervous-looking clerk behind the counter. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice quavering slightly. Maxwell stepped forward, pulling out a photo of James Harper. "We're looking for this man. We have reason to believe he's been staying here." The clerk's eyes widened in recognition, but he quickly schooled his features. "I'm sorry, I can't discuss our guests. Privacy policy, you understand?" Mike leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "Listen, we're not here to cause trouble. This man's daughter is waiting for him. She needs her father. Please, if you know anything—" Something in Mike's tone seemed to reach the clerk. He sighed heavily, then nodded towards a door behind the counter. "Room 12. But I didn't tell you anything, understand?" Maxwell's heart raced as they approached room 12. This was it. After all these months of searching, all the danger and sacrifice, they were finally going to get some answers. Mike knocked on the door. "Mr. Harper, James Harper, we need to talk to you." Silence. Maxwell stepped forward. "James, if you're in there, please. It's about Lily. She's safe, but she needs you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the door creaked open. Standing before them was James Harper, older and more weathered than his photo, but unmistakably the man they'd been searching for. "You found her," James whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Lily's really safe?" Maxwell nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "She's been living with me. She's brave and strong, James. But she misses her father terribly." James seemed to crumple at these words, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "I never wanted to leave her," he said, his voice breaking. "But they were going to hurt her if I didn't disappear. I thought—" I thought I was protecting her." Mike stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Harper, we know about the conspiracy. We know you were framed, but we need your help to bring down the people responsible. Will you come with us?" James hesitated, fear flashing across his face. "How can I trust you? How do I know this isn't a trap?" Maxwell pulled out his phone, bringing up a photo of Lily. It was from just a few days ago, showing her laughing as she played in Central Park. "This is your daughter now, James. She's safe, she's happy, but she needs her father. Help us make things right for her sake." James stared at the photo, tears welling in his eyes. Slowly, he nodded. "Okay, for Lily. I'll do whatever it takes." The drive back to the city was filled with James's story, how he had uncovered the money laundering scheme, how he had been threatened and framed, and how he had been living on the run, always looking over his shoulder. "I tried to gather evidence," James explained, "but every time I got close, they seemed to be one step ahead. It was like they had eyes everywhere." Maxwell and Mike exchanged glances. The depth of the conspiracy was even greater than they had imagined. As they neared the city, Maxwell's phone rang. It was Rachel. "Max, thank God. You need to get back here now. Something's happened." Maxwell felt his blood run cold. "Rachel, what is it?" "Is Lily okay?" "Lily's fine, she's with me," Rachel assured him quickly. "But Max, Victor Crane has resurfaced. He's calling for a press conference. Says he has evidence that will shock the nation." Maxwell's mind raced. What was Crane playing at? Was this a desperate last stand? Or did he truly have something that could turn the tables? "We're on our way," Maxwell said grimly. "Keep Lily safe, and Rachel, be careful. We don't know what Crane's planning." As he hung up, Maxwell filled Mike and James in on the situation. James's face paled. Crane was always the most dangerous of them all. If he's making a move now, it can't be good. They sped towards the city, the New York skyline growing larger on the horizon. Maxwell felt as though he was racing towards a storm, one that threatened to engulf everything he had fought so hard to protect. As they entered the city limits, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a news alert. His heart nearly stopped as he read the headline, "Breaking, Victor Crane claims evidence of government collusion in Thornton Industries scandal." The game had changed once again, and this time the stakes were higher than ever. Maxwell realized that the next few hours would determine not just his fate, or James's, or even Lily's, but potentially the future of the entire nation. As they weaved through the busy New York streets, Maxwell steeled himself for the battle ahead. He had come too far, sacrificed too much to back down now. Whatever Crane had planned, whatever revelations awaited, Maxwell Thornton was ready to face them head-on. For Lily, for James, for justice, and for the man he had become through this extraordinary journey. The final act was about to begin, and Maxwell was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The streets of New York were a blur as Maxwell's car sped towards Thornton Tower. James Harper sat in the back seat, his face a mask of anxiety and anticipation. Mike was on the phone, coordinating with FBI agents and trying to get ahead of whatever Crane had planned. Maxwell's mind raced. What could Crane possibly have? And more importantly, how could they counter it? As they pulled up to Thornton Tower, they were met by a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. Maxwell steeled himself, then turned to James. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly. James took a deep breath, then nodded. "For Lily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They stepped out of the car, immediately bombarded by shouted questions and camera flashes. Maxwell raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "I know you all have questions," he said, his voice carrying across the plaza. "And I promise they will be answered. But first I'd like to introduce someone. This is James Harper, the man who first uncovered the corruption we've been fighting, the man who was framed and forced into hiding to protect his daughter." A collective gasp went through the crowd, followed by a renewed frenzy of questions. Maxwell ignored them, guiding James through the throng and into the building. Inside, they found Rachel waiting with Lily. The moment Lily saw James, her eyes went wide. "Daddy," she whispered, as if afraid to believe it was real. James fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Lily, my sweet girl, I'm so sorry." "I'm so sorry." Lily rushed into her father's arms, both of them sobbing as they clung to each other. Maxwell felt his own eyes stinging as he watched the reunion. He caught Rachel's gaze, saw the mix of joy and sadness there, and knew she was feeling the same bittersweet emotion, but there was no time to dwell on it. A commotion from the lobby's large-screen TVs drew their attention. Victor Crane's face filled the screens, his expression one of grim determination. "My fellow Americans," Crane began, his voice smooth and controlled, "I come to you today with a heavy heart and a burden of truth that can no longer be denied. The corruption that has been uncovered at Thornton Industries is merely the tip of the iceberg. Today, I will present evidence that implicates not just corporate leaders, but high-ranking government officials in a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of our democracy." Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to Mike. "We need to get ahead of this. Whatever Crane's planning, we can't let him control the narrative." Mike nodded grimly. "I'll get our team on it." "But Max, if what Crane's saying is true, then we deal with it," Maxwell said firmly. "The truth comes out no matter who it hurts. That's what we've been fighting for all along." As they rushed to the conference room, Maxwell couldn't help but glance back at Lily and James. They were still locked in an embrace, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. He made a silent vow to protect them, no matter what happened next. In the conference room, a team of lawyers, PR specialists, and FBI agents were already hard at work. Screens displayed news feeds from various channels, all focused on Crane's press conference. "What do we know?" Maxwell demanded as he entered. Sarah, his head of PR, stepped forward. "Crane claims to have documents and recordings that prove government officials were not only aware of the money laundering scheme, but actively participated in it. He's threatening to release everything unless certain demands are met." Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "What demands?" Sarah hesitated, then said, "Full immunity for himself and several others involved in the conspiracy, and control of Thornton Industries." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Maxwell held up a hand, silencing them. "He's desperate," he said. "This is a last-ditch effort to save himself, but we're not going to play his game." He turned to the FBI agents present. "How much of what Crane's claiming is true?" The lead agent, a stern-faced woman named Rodriguez, stepped forward. "We've been investigating these allegations for weeks, Mr. Thornton. I'm afraid a significant portion of Crane's claims appear to be accurate. The corruption goes deep, possibly all the way to the cabinet level." Maxwell felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. The ramifications could shake the country to its core. But as he looked around the room at the determined faces of his team, at Mike's unwavering support, he knew what he had to do. "All right," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to beat Crane to the punch. We release everything we have, all the evidence James gathered, everything we've uncovered since. We do it now before Crane can spin it to his advantage," Sarah gasped. "Mr. Thornton, the impact on the company will survive," Maxwell cut her off. "Our integrity won't if we try to cover this up or make deals with someone like Crane." He turned to Agent Rodriguez. "I assume you have no objections to us going public with this information?" Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "It aligns with our own plans. A joint statement from Thornton Industries and the FBI could be very powerful." As the team sprang into action, Maxwell stepped out of the room for a moment. He found James and Lily waiting in his office, both looking worried. "What's happening?" James asked, his arm protectively around Lily's shoulders. Maxwell took a deep breath. "We're about to release everything, James. All the evidence you gathered, everything we've learned since. It's going to cause a firestorm, but it's the right thing to do." James nodded solemnly. "I understand. But Maxwell, what about Lily? How do we protect her from all this?" Maxwell knelt down to Lily's level, meeting her eyes. "Lily, things are going to get a little crazy for a while. There might be a lot of people asking questions, saying things that might be scary or confusing. But I promise you, your dad and we're going to keep you safe. Okay?" Lily nodded, her small face serious. "I trust you, Mr. Maxwell. And I'm glad my daddy's back. We can face anything together, right?" Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. "That's right, kiddo. Together." As he stood, he saw James watching him with a mixture of gratitude and something else, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared purpose. "Thank you," James said softly, "for everything you've done for Lily. For us?" Maxwell nodded, unable to speak past the emotion welling up inside him. With a final squeeze of Lily's shoulder, he turned and walked back to the conference room. The next few hours would change everything. The truth was about to come out, and the world would never be the same. But as Maxwell rejoined his team, ready to face whatever came next, he felt a sense of peace. No matter what happened, he knew he was doing the right thing. For Lily, for James, for his company, and for the country. The storm was breaking, but Maxwell Thornton was ready to weather it. Little did he know, the biggest challenge and the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The world seemed to hold its breath as Maxwell Thornton stepped up to the podium, flanked by FBI agent Rodriguez and James Harper. Cameras flashed and reporters leaned forward. Sensing that history was about to be made, Maxwell took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowded room. He could see the hunger for scandal in the reporters' eyes, the anticipation of a story that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. But this was about more than just headlines. This was about truth, justice, and the future of the country. "Good afternoon," Maxwell began, his voice steady and clear. "Today we stand before you to reveal a truth that will shake our nation to its core. A truth that involves corruption at the highest levels of both corporate and government leadership." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "For the past several months, my team and I, in cooperation with the FBI, have been investigating a vast conspiracy of money laundering and fraud. What we uncovered goes far beyond Thornton Industries. It implicates major corporations, financial institutions, and yes, high-ranking government officials." A murmur ran through the crowd. Maxwell held up a hand, silencing them. "Shall we have compiled irrefutable evidence of these crimes? Evidence that was first gathered by James Harper, a former employee of Thornton Industries who was framed and forced into hiding when he tried to expose the truth." James stepped forward, his face a mixture of determination and fear. "3 years ago, I discovered discrepancies in our financial records," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "When I dug deeper, I uncovered a web of corruption that stretched from Wall Street to Washington. I tried to report it, but instead, I was framed for the very crimes I was trying to expose. I had to disappear to protect my daughter." As James spoke, Maxwell noticed movement at the back of the room. Victor Crane had arrived, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Their eyes met, and Maxwell saw the desperation there. Crane knew his game was up. Maxwell turned back to the microphones. "Today, we are releasing all of the evidence we have gathered. Every document, every recording, every piece of the puzzle. We do this knowing full well the chaos it may cause, the reputations it will ruin, the faith in our institutions it may shake. But we do it because the truth must be told." He nodded to Sarah, who pressed a button on her tablet. "As of this moment, all of the evidence is being uploaded to a secure server. It is available to every news organization, every law enforcement agency, and every citizen who wishes to examine it." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed incessantly, and in the back, Maxwell could see Crane being approached by FBI agents. Suddenly, a voice cut through the din. "This is all a lie!" The crowd parted, revealing Crane, his face red with anger. "Thornton is trying to save his own skin by implicating others. He's been behind this from the start." Before anyone could react, Crane pulled out a gun. Screams filled the room as people ducked for cover. Maxwell felt himself being pulled down by Agent Rodriguez, but his eyes remained fixed on Crane. "It's over, Victor," Maxwell called out, his voice calm despite the pounding of his heart. "Put the gun down. We have the truth now. All of it." Crane's hand shook, the gun wavering between Maxwell and the crowd. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cracking. "We were trying to save the country. Sometimes hard choices have to be made for the greater good." "By stealing from the American people," James spoke up, his voice filled with righteous anger. "By destroying lives. That's not the greater good, Crane. That's just greed and corruption wearing a patriot's mask." For a moment it seemed like Crane might actually pull the trigger, but then, as suddenly as it had begun, the fight seemed to go out of him. The gun clattered to the floor, and Crane sank to his knees, his head bowed in defeat. As FBI agents moved in to apprehend Crane, Maxwell turned back to the podium. "What you've just witnessed is the desperation of a man who knows his time is up. But this isn't about one man or one company. This is about a system that has failed the American people. Today, we start the process of fixing that system." The press conference continued for another hour, with Maxwell, James, and Agent Rodriguez fielding questions and providing details about the investigation. By the time it was over, Maxwell felt drained but oddly exhilarated. The truth was out. Whatever came next, at least they no longer had to live with the weight of secrets and lies. As they left the podium, Maxwell felt a tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see Lily, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pride. "Did you do it, Mr. Maxwell?" she asked. "Did you catch the bad guys?" Maxwell knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. "We've started to, Lily. There's still a lot of work to do, but we've taken a big step today." Lily nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around Maxwell's neck. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. Over Lily's shoulder, Maxwell saw James watching them, a complicated mix of emotions playing across his face. There was gratitude there, certainly, but also something else, a recognition, perhaps, of the bond that had formed between Maxwell and Lily during his absence. As Maxwell stood, still holding Lily's hand, James approached. "That was incredible," he said softly. "I never thought I'd see the day when the truth would finally come out." Maxwell nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's just the beginning, James. There's going to be fallout from this, investigations, trials. It's going to get messy before it gets better." "I know," James replied, "but for the first time in years I feel hope. Real hope." As they stood there, the three of them forming an unlikely family unit, Maxwell felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would be difficult, no doubt. The revelations they had unleashed would shake the country to its core. There would be resistance, denial, maybe even danger. But looking at Lily's trusting face and James's grateful eyes, Maxwell knew it had all been worth it. He had started this journey as a man lost in grief and ambition, caring about little beyond his company's bottom line. Now he stood as something more, a protector, a truth-teller, maybe even a hero to some. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Maxwell Thornton was ready to face them. Not alone, but with Lily, James, and all those who believed in the power of truth and justice by his side. As they left the press room, stepping out into a world forever changed by the truths they had revealed, Maxwell felt a surge of determination. The game wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But this time, they were playing by a new set of rules. Rules of honesty, integrity, and unwavering commitment to what was right. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years it was also filled with hope, and that, Maxwell realized, was the greatest victory of all. The days following the explosive press conference were a whirlwind of activity. Maxwell found himself at the center of a media storm, hailed as both a hero and a villain depending on who was doing the talking. Thornton Tower was besieged by reporters, all clamoring for exclusive interviews and insider information. But for Maxwell, the most important task was ensuring Lily's safety and well-being. He had moved her and James to a secure location, away from the prying eyes of the press and potential threats from those implicated in the scandal. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Maxwell finally had a moment to breathe. He sat in the living room of the safe house, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the sun rise over the city skyline. The sound of soft footsteps made him turn. Lily padded into the room, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess of tangled curls. "Mr. Maxwell?" she said sleepily. "Are you okay?" Maxwell smiled, touched by her concern. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just thinking." Lily climbed onto the couch next to him, leaning against his side. "About the bad guys?" Maxwell chuckled softly. "Something like that. How are you doing, Lily? I know all of this must be very confusing and scary." Lily was quiet for a moment, her small face scrunched up in thought. "It is scary," she admitted finally, "but I'm not as afraid anymore because I have my daddy back and I have you." Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. He put an arm around Lily's shoulders, pulling her close. "That's right. You've got us both, and we're not going to let anything bad happen to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city wake up. Then Lily spoke again, her voice small and hesitant. "Mr. Maxwell, what's going to happen now?" Maxwell took a deep breath. How could he explain the complexities of the situation to an 8-year-old? "Well, a lot of things are going to change. Some people who did bad things are going to be punished. And a lot of people are going to be working very hard to fix the mistakes that were made." "Will you have to go away?" Lily asked, a note of fear creeping into her voice. Maxwell's heart clenched. "No, Lily, I'm not going anywhere. I promise. Just then, James appeared in the doorway looking rumpled and tired. "Everything okay in here?" Lily jumped up, running to give her father a hug. "Daddy!" Mr. Maxwell was explaining about the changes. James picked up his daughter, holding her close. He met Maxwell's eyes over Lily's head, a silent understanding passing between them. "Why don't you go get dressed, sweetie?" James suggested. "Maybe we can all go for a walk in the park later if it's safe." As Lily scampered off, James took a seat across from Maxwell. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Maxwell sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I'm exhausted. The press won't let up, the FBI is conducting raids practically every hour, and the stock market—" He trailed off, shaking his head. James nodded sympathetically. "I can't even imagine, Maxwell. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. For Lily, for me, for the truth." "You don't have to thank me," Maxwell said firmly. "I did what needed to be done, what was right." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Then James spoke again, his voice hesitant. "I've been thinking about the future, about what's best for Lily." Maxwell felt a knot form in his stomach. He had known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. "What are you thinking?" James took a deep breath. I think we need to leave New York. Start fresh somewhere new, somewhere Lily can have a normal childhood away from all this media attention." The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. The thought of Lily leaving, of not seeing her every day, was more painful than he had expected. But he knew James was right. Lily deserved a chance at normalcy. "I understand," Maxwell said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "You have to do what's best for Lily. Where are you thinking of going?" "I have a cousin in Colorado," James replied. "She's offered to help us get settled. It's a small town, quiet, good schools." Maxwell nodded, trying to imagine Lily among mountains and open skies, far from the bustling streets of New York. It was a bittersweet image. "When?" "Soon," James said softly. "I haven't told Lily yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Before Maxwell could respond, his phone buzzed. It was Sarah, his PR manager. "Mr. Thornton, I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but you need to see this. Turn on the news." With a sense of dread, Maxwell reached for the remote. The TV flickered to life, showing a breaking news banner. The anchor's voice filled the room. "In a shocking development, newly uncovered evidence suggests that the corruption scandal may have roots going back decades, potentially implicating former presidents and high-ranking officials long out of office. The Department of Justice has announced the formation of a special task force to investigate these historical allegations." Maxwell and James exchanged stunned looks. Just when they thought the situation couldn't get any more complex, the scope of the scandal seemed to be expanding exponentially. "I have to go," Maxwell said, already reaching for his jacket. "James, I'm sorry. We'll finish this conversation later." As he hurried out the door, Maxwell's mind was racing. The implications of these new revelations were staggering. The entire political landscape of the country could be reshaped. And once again, he found himself at the center of the storm. But even as he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, Maxwell couldn't shake the hollow feeling in his chest. The image of Lily and James leaving for Colorado lingered in his mind, a reminder of the personal cost of his quest for truth. As his car sped towards Thornton Tower, Maxwell made a silent vow. No matter what happened next, no matter how big this scandal became, he would not lose sight of what truly mattered. He had started this journey for Lily, and he would see it through. For her, for James, and for all those who had been victimized by corruption. The game was changing once again, but Maxwell Thornton was ready to play, no matter the cost. The Thornton Industries boardroom was a sea of tense faces and furrowed brows. Maxwell stood at the head of the table, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, a visual representation of the grueling weeks that had passed since the press conference. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion, "I won't sugarcoat this. We're facing the biggest crisis in our company's history. The stock has taken a hit, we've lost contracts, and public opinion is mixed, to say the least." Murmurs of agreement and concern rippled through the room. Maxwell held up a hand, silencing them. "But we also have an opportunity here, an opportunity to rebuild not just our company, but trust in corporate America. We can set a new standard for transparency and ethical business practices." Sarah, his PR manager, spoke up. "Mr. Thornton, while I agree with the sentiment, the reality is that we're hemorrhaging money. The shareholders are demanding action. Maxwell nodded grimly. I'm aware. That's why I've called this meeting. I have a proposal, one that I believe will not only save our company, but position us as leaders in corporate reform. He outlined his plan, a complete restructuring of the company with new oversight committees, transparency initiatives, and a significant portion of profits dedicated to restitution for those harmed by the corruption scandal. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some supportive, others vehemently opposed. Maxwell let the debate rage for a few minutes before calling for order. I understand your concerns, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. This is a risk, a big one. But I believe it's a risk we have to take, not just for the company but for ourselves, for the kind of people we want to be. As the meeting continued, Maxwell found his mind drifting to Lily and James. He hadn't seen them in days, caught up in the whirlwind of investigations, interviews, and crisis management. The thought of them preparing to leave for Colorado sat like a weight in his chest. Finally, after hours of heated discussion, a consensus was reached. Maxwell's plan would move forward, with some modifications. As the board members filed out, Mike lingered behind. That was quite a performance, he said, clapping Maxwell on the shoulder. You okay? Maxwell sighed, sinking into his chair. I'm not sure okay is the right word, but I'm managing. Mike's expression softened. Have you talked to them? James and Lily? Maxwell shook his head. Not since Sunday. I've been meaning to, but he gestured at the piles of documents and reports covering his desk. Max, Mike said gently, I know you're trying to save the world here, but don't forget about the people who matter most. Go see them. The rest of this can wait. Maxwell nodded, realizing Mike was right. He had been throwing himself into work, partly to avoid facing the reality of Lily's impending departure. An hour later, Maxwell found himself standing outside the safe house, a bag of Lily's favorite takeout in hand. He took a deep breath, then knocked. James answered, surprise flickering across his face. Maxwell, we weren't expecting you. I know, I'm sorry for dropping in unannounced. I needed to see you both. Is Lily awake? Before James could answer, a blur of motion shot past him. Mr. Maxwell, Lily cried, launching herself into his arms. Maxwell caught her, holding her close. Hey there, kiddo. I've missed you. Over dinner, Maxwell listened as Lily chatted excitedly about the books she'd been reading and the art projects she'd been working on. James watched them with a mixture of gratitude and something else. A sadness, perhaps, at the bond that had formed between his daughter and this man who had become so important to them both. As Lily cleared the dishes, insisting she was old enough to help, James turned to Maxwell. We've set a date, he said quietly. We're leaving for Colorado next week. Maxwell felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. He had known it was coming, but hearing it confirmed made it painfully real. So soon, he managed to say. James nodded. We think it's for the best, to get Lily settled before the new school year starts. Does she know? We told her yesterday. She's processing. Just then Lily returned, her face serious. Mr. Maxwell, is it true you're not coming with us to Colorado? Maxwell's heart clenched. He knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his. Lily, sweetheart, I can't come with you. My work is here, but that doesn't mean we won't see each other. We can video chat and I'll come visit whenever I can. Lily's lower lip trembled. But it won't be the same. You're family now. Families are supposed to stay together. Maxwell pulled her into a hug, fighting back his own tears. Oh, Lily, you're right. We are family, and that doesn't change, no matter how far apart we are. I promise you, this isn't goodbye. It's just, see you later. As he held her, Maxwell caught James's eye over Lily's head. There was understanding there and shared pain. They both knew that this separation was necessary, but that didn't make it any easier. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Maxwell and James sat on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. I can't thank you enough, James said softly, for everything you've done for us, for Lily. Maxwell shook his head. You don't have to thank me. Lily. She changed my life, gave me purpose when I'd lost my way. If anything, I should be thanking you. They sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, Maxwell spoke again. James, I want you to know, whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm here, for both of you. Always. James nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know. And Maxwell? Don't lose yourself in all of this. The world needs what you're doing, but don't forget to live too. As Maxwell left the safe house that night, his heart was heavy but full. The road ahead would be difficult, rebuilding his company, continuing to unravel the threads of corruption, learning to live without Lily's daily presence in his life. But as he looked back at the building, seeing Lily's small face pressed against the window waving goodbye, Maxwell felt a surge of determination. He had started this journey to save a little girl, and in the process, he had found a family and rediscovered his own humanity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Maxwell Thornton was ready to face them. For Lily, for James, for the truth, and for the man he had become. A man who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives you touched and the good you did in the world. The game had changed, irrevocably, but Maxwell was no longer just a player. He was a champion for truth, justice, and the power of redemption, and that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all. The day of Lily and James's departure dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Maxwell's heart. He stood in the private hangar of the airport, watching as the last of their luggage was loaded onto the small private jet he had insisted on providing for their journey. Lily clung to his hand, her small fingers intertwined with his, as if trying to memorize the feeling. "Do we really have to go, Mr. Maxwell?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Maxwell knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. "I'm afraid so, kiddo. But remember, this isn't goodbye. It's just a new adventure, and I'll come visit you so often. You'll probably get sick of me." Lily shook her head vehemently. "Never, I could never get sick of you, Mr. Maxwell." James approached, his face a mix of gratitude and sadness. "It's time, Lily. We need to board." Maxwell stood, his hand still in Lily's. He looked at James, trying to find the right words. "James, thank you for trusting me, for letting me be a part of your lives." James nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Maxwell, for everything. We wouldn't be here, safe together, if it wasn't for you." They embraced, a gesture that would have seemed impossible just months ago. As they pulled apart, Maxwell felt Lily tugging on his sleeve. "Mr. Maxwell, I made this for you." She held out a folded piece of paper. Maxwell took it, carefully unfolding it to reveal a crayon drawing. It showed 3 figures, a tall man in a suit, a smaller man, and a little girl between them, all holding hands. Above them, in Lily's careful handwriting, were the words, "My family." Maxwell felt his throat tighten with emotion. He pulled Lily into a fierce hug, not caring about the tears that threatened to spill. "I love it, Lily. I'll keep it with me always." As Lily and James boarded the plane, Maxwell stood on the tarmac watching. Lily's face appeared in one of the windows, her small hand pressed against the glass. Maxwell raised his own hand in farewell, holding the pose until the plane taxied away and disappeared into the sky. For a long moment, Maxwell stood there, feeling as if a part of him had left with that plane. Then, squaring his shoulders, he turned and walked back to his waiting car. There was work to be done. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Maxwell threw himself into the task of rebuilding Thornton Industries, implementing the sweeping reforms he had promised. It wasn't easy. There was resistance from some quarters, skepticism from others. But slowly, surely, things began to change. One evening, as Maxwell sat in his office reviewing the latest financial reports, his phone buzzed with an incoming video call. His heart leapt when he saw the caller ID. "Lily!" he exclaimed, as the little girl's face filled the screen. "How are you, kiddo?" Lily's smile was as bright as ever. "Mr. Maxwell, I miss you. Colorado is really pretty, but it's not the same without you." They chatted for a while, Lily excitedly telling him about her new school, the mountains she could see from her bedroom window, and the deer that sometimes wandered into their backyard. Maxwell drank in every word, realizing how much he had missed her chatter. As their call was winding down, Lily's expression grew serious. "Mr. Maxwell, are you okay? Daddy says you're doing important things, but you look tired." Maxwell was taken aback by her perceptiveness. "I'm all right, Lily, just been working hard. But hearing from you makes everything better." After saying goodbye, Maxwell sat back in his chair, Lily's words echoing in his mind. He glanced at the framed crayon drawing on his desk, then at the stacks of reports and documents surrounding him. For the first time in weeks, he wondered if he had lost sight of what was truly important. The next morning, Maxwell called an emergency board meeting. As the directors filed in, looks of concern on their faces, Maxwell felt a sense of calm certainty. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I've called you here today because I've made a decision. I'm stepping down as CEO of Thornton Industries." The room erupted in shocked exclamations and protests. Maxwell held up a hand, silencing them. "This company needs new leadership to guide it through the reforms we've initiated. Someone untainted by the scandals of the past. I'll remain on the board, but it's time for fresh eyes and new ideas." As the reality of his words sank in, Maxwell continued, "I've prepared a list of potential candidates for interim CEO. I trust you'll make the right choice. As for me, I'll be taking some time off. There are some promises I need to keep." Later that day, as news of his resignation spread through the financial world, Maxwell boarded a private jet. But this time, he wasn't heading to a business meeting or a crisis negotiation. He was going to Colorado. As the plane took off, Maxwell looked out the window at the New York skyline receding in the distance. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For so long, he had defined himself by his work, by the empire he had built. But now he understood that true wealth wasn't measured in stock prices or profit margins. It was measured in the lives you touched, the differences you made. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Maxwell Thornton was looking forward to it. He had a family waiting for him in Colorado, a chance to make good on his promises, and a whole new life to explore. As the plane soared through the clouds, Maxwell closed his eyes, a small smile playing on his lips. The game had changed one final time, and this time everyone was going to win. The crisp Colorado air filled Maxwell's lungs as he stepped out of the small airport terminal. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the warm spring day. It was a world away from the concrete canyons of New York, and Maxwell felt a sense of peace wash over him. A familiar voice cut through his reverie. "Mr. Maxwell." He turned to see Lily running towards him, her pigtails bouncing, James following close behind with a warm smile. Maxwell knelt down, arms open wide, and Lily crashed into him with the force of her excitement. "You're here, you're really here," Lily exclaimed, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. Maxwell chuckled, standing up with Lily still in his arms. "I told you I'd come visit, didn't I? And I always keep my promises." James approached, extending his hand. "Maxwell, it's good to see you." They shook hands, but the formality felt out of place. Without hesitation, Maxwell pulled James into a one-armed hug, Lily still clinging to his other side. For a moment, they stood there, an unlikely family reunited. The drive to James and Lily's new home was filled with Lily's excited chatter, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of their new life. Maxwell drank it all in, realizing how much he had missed this. Their house was a cozy log cabin on the outskirts of town, with a sprawling yard that backed up to a dense forest. As they pulled into the driveway, Maxwell noticed a treehouse in the backyard, clearly a work in progress. "Daddy's building it for me," Lily explained proudly, "but he says some of the higher parts are tricky. Maybe you could help while you're here, Mr. Maxwell." Maxwell grinned. "I'd be honored to help, though I have to warn you, I'm much better with spreadsheets than with hammers." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, James turned to Maxwell with a serious expression. "I heard about your resignation," he said quietly. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Maxwell nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely sure. The company will be fine without me. It's time for me to focus on what really matters." James was quiet for a moment, then asked, "And what will you do now?" Maxwell turned to him, a small smile playing on his lips. "Well, for starters, I thought I might stick around here for a while. If that's okay with you and Lily, of course. I hear there's a treehouse that needs building." James's face broke into a grin. "I think we'd like that very much." The next few weeks passed in a blur of simple pleasures. Maxwell threw himself into helping with the treehouse, his designer suits replaced by flannel shirts and jeans. He attended Lily's school play, cheering louder than anyone when she delivered her one line perfectly. He and James spent evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, forging a friendship that went beyond their shared history. But it wasn't all idyllic. The investigation into the corruption scandal continued, and Maxwell found himself flying back to New York several times to give depositions and meet with investigators. Each time, returning to Colorado felt more and more like coming home. One evening, as Maxwell and James sat in the completed treehouse, sharing a beer and watching the stars come out, James turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You know, when all this started, I never imagined we'd end up here," he said. "I was so angry, so afraid. I thought I'd lost everything." Maxwell nodded, understanding all too well. "And now?" James smiled, his eyes distant. "Now I realize I've gained more than I ever lost. My daughter is safe and happy. I have my life back, and I have a friend I never expected." They clinked their bottles together, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come. The next morning, as Maxwell helped Lily with her math homework at the kitchen table, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made his breath catch. Former Thornton Industries CEO Victor Crane found dead in prison cell. Maxwell excused himself, stepping outside to read the full article. Crane had apparently taken his own life, leaving behind a confession that implicated several high-ranking government officials who had managed to avoid scrutiny until now. As he stood there processing the news, Maxwell felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down to see Lily, her face concerned. "Are you okay, Mr. Maxwell?" she asked. Maxwell knelt down, meeting her eyes. "I'm all right, Lily. Just got some surprising news. But you know what? It made me realize something important." "What's that?" Lily asked, curious. "That sometimes the best thing we can do is to make a fresh start, to let go of the past and focus on building a better future." Lily nodded solemnly, as if she understood perfectly. "Like we did when we moved here?" Maxwell smiled, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Exactly like that." As they walked back into the house together, Maxwell felt a sense of closure. The last threads of his old life were unraveling, making way for something new and beautiful. That night, as he lay in bed listening to the sound of wind in the pines, Maxwell reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had lost an empire, but gained a family. He had faced corruption and greed, but rediscovered his own humanity. Maxwell Thornton, once defined by his wealth and power, now found himself rich in ways he had never imagined possible. As he drifted off to sleep, a smile played on his lips. The game was over, but the real adventure was just beginning. In the morning, he would wake up to help make Lily's breakfast, to work on the garden with James, to live a life full of small joys and deep connections. And he wouldn't have it any other way. For in the end, Maxwell had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the love we give, the lives we touch, and the difference we make in the world. As the stars twinkled over the Colorado mountains, a chapter closed in Maxwell Thornton's life. But a new one, filled with promise and possibility, was just beginning to unfold. As summer faded into fall, the Colorado mountains burst into a spectacular display of gold and crimson. Maxwell Thornton stood on the porch of the cabin, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands, marveling at the beauty of it all. The past few months had been a journey of rediscovery, of learning to find joy in the simple things. The sound of tires on gravel drew his attention. A sleek black SUV was making its way up the driveway, looking decidedly out of place in the rustic setting. Maxwell's brow furrowed. They weren't expecting visitors. As the car came to a stop, the driver's door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. Maxwell's heart skipped a beat. It was Mike Rodriguez. "Mike?" Maxwell called out, setting his coffee down and descending the porch steps. "What are you doing here?" Mike's face was grim as he approached. "Max, we need to talk. Is James around?" Before Maxwell could respond, the front door opened and James emerged, Lily close behind him. "Detective Rodriguez," James said, surprise evident in his voice. "What's going on?" Mike's eyes softened as they landed on Lily. "Hey there, kiddo. Mind if I borrow your dad and Mr. Maxwell for a bit?" Lily looked between the three men, her young face creased with worry. "Is everything okay?" Maxwell knelt down to her level. "Everything's fine, Lily. We just need to have a grown-up talk. Why don't you go work on that painting you were telling me about? We won't be long." As Lily reluctantly went back inside, the three men gathered in the living room. The tension was palpable as Mike took a seat, his expression serious. "I'll cut to the chase," Mike began. "We've uncovered new evidence in the corruption case. It goes deeper than we ever imagined, and it implicates some people we thought were on our side." Maxwell and James exchanged worried glances. "What kind of evidence?" James asked. Mike pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. Financial records, encrypted emails, offshore accounts. It paints a picture of a conspiracy that's been in the works for decades. And Max, your father's name is all over it. The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. His father, Jonathan Thornton, had been a titan of industry, a man Maxwell had always looked up to. The idea that he could have been involved in something like this was almost incomprehensible. That's impossible, Maxwell stammered. My father was many things, but he wasn't corrupt. He built Thornton Industries from the ground up. Mike's expression was sympathetic but firm. I'm sorry, Max, but the evidence is pretty damning. It looks like your father was one of the architects of this whole scheme, and there's more. We have reason to believe that some of the people involved are still out there, and they're not happy about the investigation. James leaned forward, his face pale. What are you saying, Mike? I'm saying that you might not be as safe here as we thought. These people have long memories and deep pockets. They might see you as loose ends that need tying up. The implications of Mike's words sank in. Maxwell felt a cold dread settle in the pit of his stomach. They had thought it was over, that they had left the danger behind in New York, but now it seemed the past had caught up with them once again. What do we do? Maxwell asked, his mind already racing with possibilities. Mike sighed heavily. For now, we need to move you to a secure location. All of you. We can't risk them finding you here. James stood up abruptly, pacing the room. No, I won't uproot Lily again. She's finally settled. She's happy here. I won't take that away from her. Maxwell understood James's reluctance. The thought of disrupting Lily's life again, of seeing fear return to her eyes, was almost unbearable. But the alternative was unthinkable. James, Maxwell said softly, I know it's not fair, but we have to keep Lily safe. That's the most important thing. For a long moment, James said nothing, his back turned to them as he stared out the window. Finally, his shoulders slumped in resignation. You're right, of course you're right. But how do we explain this to Lily? As if on cue, a small voice came from the doorway. Explain what to me? They all turned to see Lily standing there, her eyes wide with concern. Maxwell's heart ached at the sight of her, so innocent and unaware of the danger that threatened to shatter her newfound peace. Lily, sweetheart, James began, his voice gentle, we need to go on a little trip. Just for a while. Lily's lower lip trembled. But why? Is it because of the bad men again? I thought they were gone. Maxwell knelt down, taking Lily's small hands in his. Sometimes, Lily, problems don't go away as quickly as we'd like. But I promise you, we're going to fix this, and we're all going to stick together, okay? Lily nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around Maxwell's neck. As long as we're together, I'm not scared, she whispered. As Maxwell held her close, he met James's eyes over her head. There was determination there, mixed with fear and resignation. They both knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew they would face it as a family. Mike cleared his throat, breaking the moment. We need to move fast. Pack only what you absolutely need. Shall make the arrangements for your transport. As James took Lily to help her pack, Maxwell lingered in the living room, his eyes drawn to the family photos that now adorned the walls. Images of Lily's first day of school in Colorado, of James teaching her to fish in the nearby stream, of Maxwell helping her build a snowman last winter. A life they had built together, now threatened by the ghosts of the past. Maxwell felt a fierce protectiveness well up inside him. He had already lost one family. He wouldn't lose this one. Whatever it took, whatever sacrifices he had to make, he would keep Lily and James safe. As he turned to go pack his own belongings, Maxwell's resolve hardened. The game wasn't over after all. But this time, he wasn't just playing for himself. He was playing for the family he had found, for the love that had given his life new meaning. And he was determined to win, no matter the cost. The safe house was a far cry from the cozy cabin in Colorado. Located on the outskirts of a small town in Montana, it was a nondescript ranch-style house, surrounded by acres of empty land. To Lily, it felt like the edge of the world. 2 weeks had passed since their hasty departure from Colorado, 2 weeks of uncertainty, of whispered conversations between the adults, of Lily trying to be brave, even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. Maxwell stood at the window, watching as Lily and James played a half-hearted game of catch in the backyard. The sight should have been heartwarming, but the ever-present security detail patrolling the perimeter served as a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just out of sight. Mike entered the room, his face grim. "We've got a problem, Max. Our inside source just went dark. We think they might have been compromised." Maxwell's jaw clenched. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we might have less time than we thought. The people behind this, they're closing in." As the words sank in, Maxwell felt a familiar mix of fear and determination. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to let it end like this. "What's our next move?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. Mike hesitated, then said, "I think it's time we took the fight to them. We have enough evidence to bring down the entire network. We just need to get it to the right people." Maxwell nodded slowly. "You're talking about going public, blowing this whole thing wide open." "It's risky," Mike admitted, "but at this point it might be our best shot at keeping you all safe. Once the story breaks, they'll be too busy trying to save themselves to come after you." As they discussed the details of the plan, Maxwell's mind wandered to the revelations about his father. The idea that Jonathan Thornton, the man he had idolized for so long, could have been at the heart of such corruption was still difficult to process. But Maxwell knew that he couldn't let the sins of the father define the path of the son. Later that evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed, Maxwell and James sat on the porch, the Montana night spread out before them like a velvet blanket studded with stars. "James," Maxwell began, his voice low, "I need to ask you something important." James turned to him, his expression wary. "What is it?" Maxwell took a deep breath. "If this all goes sideways, if something happens to me, I need you to promise me you'll take care of Lily. Keep her safe. Give her the life she deserves." James's eyes widened in alarm. "Max, what are you planning?" "Nothing specific," Maxwell assured him. "But this situation, it's volatile, unpredictable. I just need to know that no matter what happens, Lily will be okay." James was quiet for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. "You have my word. But Maxwell, you're a part of this family now. We need you too." The words warmed Maxwell's heart, even as they steeled his resolve. He would do whatever it took to protect this family, to give Lily and James the chance at a normal life they so desperately deserved. The next few days were a flurry of activity. Mike coordinated with trusted contacts in the media and law enforcement, preparing for the moment when they would release everything they knew to the public. Maxwell spent hours on secure video calls, giving statements and providing evidence. Through it all, Lily watched with worried eyes, sensing the tension that filled the house. One evening, as Maxwell sat reviewing documents, he felt a small hand on his arm. "Mr. Maxwell," Lily said, her voice small, "are the bad men coming back?" Maxwell set aside his work, pulling Lily into his lap. "Lily, do you remember the story of David and Goliath? How David, even though he was small, was brave enough to stand up to the giant?" Lily nodded, her eyes wide. "Well, sometimes in life, we have to be like David. We have to be brave and stand up to things that seem much bigger and scarier than us. But do you know what gives David his strength?" Lily shook her head. Maxwell smiled softly. "Love, Lily. Love for his family, his people. And that's what gives us our strength too. The love we have for each other." Lily seemed to consider this for a moment, then wrapped her arms around Maxwell's neck. "I love you, Mr. Maxwell. You and Daddy are my heroes." Maxwell held her close, blinking back tears. "We love you too, Lily. More than you could ever know." The day of the public reveal dawned bright and clear. Maxwell, James, and Mike gathered around the TV, watching as news anchors began to break the story. The evidence they had provided was damning, implicating dozens of high-ranking officials and business leaders in a web of corruption that spanned decades. As the story unfolded, Maxwell's phone began to ring incessantly. Old colleagues, journalists, even a few of the implicated parties trying to save themselves. He ignored them all, his focus entirely on the little girl who sat between him and James, her small hand clutched tightly in his. Hours passed and the story showed no signs of slowing down. It was the biggest scandal in recent memory, dominating every news channel and social media platform. And at the center of it all was the name Thornton, not as a villain, but as the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. As night fell, Mike received word that arrests were already being made. The network was crumbling, its members turning on each other in a desperate bid to save themselves. "It's over," Mike said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "We did it." The relief that washed over the room was palpable. James pulled Lily into a tight hug, tears streaming down his face. Maxwell stood by the window, watching as the sun set on what felt like the end of an era. Lily's voice broke through his reverie. "Mr. Maxwell, does this mean we can go home now?" Maxwell turned to her, a smile spreading across his face. "Yes, Lily, we can go home." As they began to make plans for their return to Colorado, Maxwell felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but they had emerged stronger, bound together by love and shared experience. The game was truly over now. And as Maxwell looked at the faces of James and Lily, he knew that he had won something far more valuable than any corporate empire or financial success. He had won a family, a purpose, and a chance at a life filled with love and meaning. As the stars came out over Montana, Maxwell Thornton made one final promise to himself. He would spend the rest of his days cherishing this gift he had been given, honoring the trust placed in him by a little girl who had changed his life forever. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope, and for the first time in a very long time, Maxwell Thornton was truly completely happy. 5 years had passed since the day Maxwell Thornton, James Harper and little Lily had returned to their cabin in Colorado. The world had changed dramatically in that time, shaped by the revelations they had brought to light. But here, nestled in the mountains, life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Maxwell stood on the porch, watching as Lily, now 13, helped James string lights for her upcoming birthday party. Her laughter echoed across the yard, a sound that never failed to warm Maxwell's heart. "Mr. Maxwell," Lily called out, waving enthusiastically. "Come help us, Dad's tangling everything up." James feigned offense, but his eyes twinkled with mirth. "I'll have you know I'm an expert light stringer, young lady." Maxwell chuckled, descending the steps to join them. As he helped untangle a particularly stubborn knot of lights, he marveled at how far they had come. The aftermath of their revelations had been chaotic. For months, the news had been dominated by stories of arrests, trials, and political upheaval. Thornton Industries had undergone a complete restructuring, emerging as a model of corporate transparency and ethical business practices. Maxwell had played a key role in the transition, but had steadfastly refused to retake the CEO position, preferring his new life in Colorado. James had found his calling in advocacy work, using his experiences to help other whistleblowers and fight corporate corruption. His work often took him across the country, but he always came back to the cabin, to Lily and Maxwell. And Lily had blossomed. The scared little girl they had first met was now a confident, compassionate young woman. She excelled in school, particularly in art and science, and had recently started talking about wanting to become a lawyer to help people like Daddy and Mr. Maxwell. As they finished hanging the lights, a car pulled up the driveway. Mike Rodriguez stepped out, his hair now more gray than black, but his smile as warm as ever. "Uncle Mike," Lily exclaimed, running to give him a hug. Over the years, Mike had become a frequent visitor and an honorary member of their unconventional family. "Hey, kiddo," Mike said, ruffling Lily's hair affectionately. "Happy almost birthday. You ready for your party tomorrow?" As Lily enthusiastically began detailing her party plans to Mike, Maxwell and James exchanged a glance. They had come so far from those tense days in the safe house, when every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Now they were preparing for a birthday party, surrounded by friends and loved ones. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, the three men sat around the fire pit in the backyard, nursing beers and reminiscing. "You know," Mike said, gazing into the flames, "when I first got involved in this case, I never imagined it would end up like this. Exposing a nationwide conspiracy, sure. But this?" He gestured around at the cabin, the string lights twinkling in the trees. "This family you've built, that's the real miracle." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "There were so many times I thought we wouldn't make it, that they'd catch up to us or that the truth would stay buried. But somehow, we did it. We did it together," Maxwell added softly. "All of us." They fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Maxwell found his mind wandering to his father, to the complex legacy he had left behind. The revelations about Jonathan Thornton's involvement in the conspiracy had been a bitter pill to swallow, but they had also given Maxwell a chance to redefine what the Thornton name meant, not through wealth or power, but through integrity and compassion. "Hey, James said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking, Lily's been asking about changing her last name to Thornton Harper." Maxwell felt his breath catch in his throat. "James, are you sure?" James smiled, reaching out to clasp Maxwell's shoulder. "Max, you've been as much a father to her as I have. More, sometimes. Your family in every way that matters. If you're okay with it, we'd both like to make it official." Tears pricked at Maxwell's eyes as he nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Mike raised his beer bottle in a toast. "To family," he said simply. "To family," Maxwell and James echoed. The next day, Lily's birthday party was in full swing. Kids from her school ran around the yard, playing games and enjoying the unseasonably warm weather. Adults chatted in small groups, a mix of local friends and those who had been part of their journey from the beginning. As Maxwell stood back, taking in the scene, he felt a tug on his sleeve. It was Lily, her face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Maxwell," she said, her voice suddenly shy, "Dad told me about the name change. Is it really okay with you?" Maxwell knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level, as he had done so many times over the years. "Lily," he said softly, "nothing would make me prouder than to share my name with you. You and your dad, you gave me a family when I thought I had lost everything. You taught me what really matters in life." Lily's eyes welled up with tears as she threw her arms around Maxwell's neck. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. Maxwell's heart soared at the word, Dad. It was a title he had never expected to hold, but one that now meant everything to him. As the party continued around them, Maxwell held Lily close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter at a charity event to this, a family bonded by love, trust, and shared experiences. The sun began to set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Maxwell looked out at the gathered friends and family, at James chatting with Mike by the grill, at Lily now running off to join her friends in another game. He thought about the man he had been all those years ago, wealthy, powerful, but ultimately alone. And he thought about the man he was now, a father, a friend, a part of something greater than himself. The game of corporate power and wealth that had once consumed him seemed distant now, like a half-remembered dream. In its place was something far more precious, a life rich in love, purpose, and genuine happiness. As night fell and stars began to twinkle overhead, Maxwell Thornton smiled to himself. The greatest adventure of his life hadn't been exposing a conspiracy or running a multi-billion-dollar company. It had been this, learning to open his heart, to be a father, to build a family. And as he joined Lily and James to cut the birthday cake, surrounded by the warmth of love and laughter, Maxwell knew with absolute certainty that he had won the only game that truly mattered, the game of life, love, and family. And in this game, everyone, Maxwell, James, Lily, and all those whose lives they had touched, had emerged victorious.